First up, I have the band Abhorria with their sophomore album, Deaths. And this is an absolutely bonkers album that goes from the absolute metal extremes to near doom metal and everything in between. It's a real harsh listen, but it's also for those that love the styles of music like I do. Basically a mix of Anal Nathrak and Acre Cocky vocals. You mix those together and you have one of the darkest American metal albums of 2024 so far. I know that's kind of weird to say with it only being January, but hey, this is right up there. This album is a fantastic listen for those that love the extreme side of things, and is well worth your time. Next up, we have Ancient Wisdom with Master of the Stone. Now, this is an album I've been waiting for quite a bit of time, as the last Ancient Wisdom album came out in 2019, I believe, and that is too long of a wait. And I'm so glad the band is back, and it feels like they really know what to do with their audience, and give everyone everything. If you love the acoustic side that they did on albums like A God Like Inferno, that is here. If you like the more metal side, that's here as well. If you want the more hard rock and catchy side, of course, that is here as well. And of course, with Nathan Opposition and Nathan Yakum being busy in their own stuff right now, being in Nunslaughter or doing DJ gigs with some nice metal gothic stuff going on, of course they're going to be a little busy. And I'm so glad that they came back together and reignited Ancient Wisdom, as this is some of the best material the band has done to date. It might take a few spins, but once you get into it, you can't. Next, we have the 6th album from Caligula's Horse, Charcoal Grays. And this band has expanded upon their sound, but also know what really works for the band. They know when they get proggy, they know when they get heavy. They have some magnificent production on this album, arguably the best production the band has done to date. It feels like everything is going right for this band, and seeing all of the promotion the band has gotten over the years, and just seeing their steady climb, it is so fantastic to see. And I imagine in 2024, more people will be able to jump on the Caligula's Horse train, which is ironic when you think about it, but I really love what's going on with this album, and I think it's going to be one of the finest prog metal albums of 2024. Next up is the 3rd album from the UK outfit Cognizance, with the album Fantazine. And this album feels like an album that really combines the best elements of like tech death and deathcore, but also with really old school death metal at the same time. Like whenever I hear something that sounds like the Faceless or Veil of Penanth or the Zenith Passage, I also hear elements of Bloodbath, especially the Michael Akerfeld era of Bloodbath, especially in the vocals. And it's a really good combination. They know when to be technical, when to hold back and just groove and just do some nice heavy OSDM. It's a great combination, and I hope more bands kind of follow in this trend where you just don't have to do technical fretboard Olympics all the time. It's a nice balance, and if you're looking for something not too technical but not too old school, this might be an album for you. Up next, we have the sophomore album from the band Disconnected Souls, with Fragments of Consciousness. Now, this album is quite the trip. It has a lot of modern metal elements, a little bit of melodic death metal, almost getting into deathcore territories at times, but it's also balanced out by more dance music, EDM, rave kind of stuff. It really feels cinematic, and they describe themselves as a cinematic metal band, and I think that perfectly makes sense. Every song feels like it's telling a story. Is it all connected? I'm not entirely sure, but when you listen to it, it feels like a great album experience from start to finish. I know this won't be for everyone, especially if you're not into the more dancey kind of things. It can be a little jarring for you, but if you do want to experiment with your tastes, I think Disconnected Souls could be something you're really into. And if you're into bands like Rage of Light, you need to check out Disconnected Souls. Up next is the debut album from Domination Campaign, A Storm of Steel, featuring members of Psychroptic, Joe and Jason. It's great to see them expanding beyond the tech death realm and going something a bit more straight ahead death metal. Like, they really focus on the death metal grooves on this one. You can still kind of hear that Psychroptic influence on here, but it's more straight back and has more of that early to mid 90s 80s feel. And a little bit more like in the triggers department. I mean, you obviously will hear the triggers, but I think it still balances out into a nice, great blend of old school death metal. And for anyone that loves tech death but is kind of bored by normal death metal, should give this album a shot, because if Psychroptic can appreciate the old school death metal, so can. Next is the band Fragments of Lost Memories with Yaku Soku, which is Japanese for promise. And considering this is the band's 5th album in 3 years, you would sure think that whether this is a one-man project, a full-on band, the members aren't included, so I don't know who's really a part of this. You would think still, 5 albums in 3 years, that you would kind of run out of ideas by now, but that is certainly not the case. The band starts off with a near 32-minute epic, and it's absolutely insane at that. I really don't get to hear much of the Japanese funeral doom stuff. Of course, I miss bands like Corrupted, but it's great to have a band like this going around, and I hope that they continue to flourish, because I need some more Japanese-style funeral doom metal in my life, and so do you. Next up, we have The Funeral Procession with In Still Silence. The debut album from this Texas band feels like it's unearthed from the 90s progressive death metal scene, but it has come out here in 2024 from this Texas band, and it's absolutely incredible. It combines some of the best moments of something like Opeth, especially like Still Life or My Arms Your Hearse. It has a little bit of that Finnish melodic death metal side to it. It's a little bit raw, but not unlistenable like a lot of black metal. It's not overly polished. It's just perfect for what it is. It has that old school sound, but it also has some modern influences as well. And I really think I'm going to be holding this album in very high contempt, and I could see this one heavily being in at least the top 50, if not, of course, the top 100 albums of 2024. I love everything about this album, and if you love progressive death metal, you owe it to yourself to give this one a chance. Next up, we have Fugit with Bury Me Here. The 7th album from this one-man Italian black gaze band is something to truly behold. It's so dark, it's so ethereal, but it hits so perfectly, with very dark, depressing lyrics, a very raw production, but not too raw, kind of like what I talked about in the last review about black metal, sometimes just sounding like it's on Fisher-Price material. This is a step above that, but everything here just sounds incredible. With some guest female vocals, the one-man band does everything himself on this album and just has a great ethereal, dark feel behind it. And if you need some black gaze in 2024, you don't need to look much further than this. This is some of the best black gaze I've heard in quite some time. Up next, we have Lucid Funeral with Terminal Lucidity. The debut album from this band is mind-blowing. Considering the ages of everyone in this band, considering the vocalist, guitarist, and main songwriter of the band, who has his own YouTube channel, Rav Riffs, is 20 years old. This is some absolutely killer stuff that really has that love of 90s progressive death metal and progressive black metal. If you like Dissection, Emperor, Death, Incantation, Atheist, all of these bands, there's something to love about this. It has a great, dark, grimacing feel behind it. It has a nice raw production that really matches the mood of all of that, but it's done through a 2024 filter, and it's so fantastic to hear. If this is what they're doing on their debut album, I can't wait to see what's next. And especially when you're only 20 years old and putting out music like this, you have your whole life ahead of you to be able to put out more amazing music. Next up, we have Lucifer with Lucifer 5. I can't believe this band is already 5 albums in, and they just sound stronger and stronger with absolutely every single release. I argue this may be the best Lucifer album to date. It just hits that perfect tone of that classic doom metal sound, that occult rock sound, and being super, super catchy. The production on here is stellar. Everyone a part of the band now really feels like they're focused in and making the best stuff possible. Everything here is just going in the right direction. And if you love that occult rock sound and you're not a Lucifer fan, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. Check them out now. One of the best bands in the style going, and it only takes one listen to understand why. Next up, we have the band Mega Colossus with Showdown. And I didn't realize 2 of the members of this band used to be a part of Bloody Hammers, one of my favorite gothic tinged bands. And no, Mega Colossus does not sound like that. They are straight up American bred heavy metal. And it's so cool to hear that too, the diversity that musicians can have. And going into this style, it really does have that American flair of heavy metal going on with it. Of course, it's got the fantasy style lyrics, and you can hear the new wave of British heavy metal going through there, but they're really making it their own. And that's why I really like the revival style metal bands that have been going on for quite some time now. There needs to be more bands like this, especially in America, and while the group is still going strong, I mean the genre group, there can always be more, and I'm excited to hear what Mega Colossus does next. Morning Dawn with their 6th album, The Foam of Despair. This is the first album I've heard from this band, and honestly, I gotta hand it, Banger TV is actually what showed me this band for the very first time, and I am so intrigued. Blackened doom metal with some avant-garde tendencies. Like on the very first song, you'll hear some saxophone in there, which oddly fits and gives it kind of a noir kind of feel behind it. And there's some other elements that you just don't expect that happens towards the end, like a little more electronica moments, which you wouldn't think works, at least on paper, but in execution it works so perfectly. Black and Doom, being able to be experimental with it, and one of the finest albums of January 2024. I'm so excited that I found out about this band, and hey, up next is the legendary Rib Spreader with Reap Humanity, the band's 10th album, and wouldn't you know it, most of the band resides in the US now, considering Taylor and Jeremy are of the band The Absence and the very underrated Necromancing the Stone. It is so great to see this band come back in full force like this and put out just that classic 90s old school death metal sound. That HM2 pedal is in full force here. Thank you, Dan Swano, for making that popular. This is so fantastic of that old school style. And even though the band started in the 2000s, it just has that love for that old school style. It introduces a little bit of newer influences once in a while, but not really anything that would take away from the sound. Just pure, unadulterated OSDM. And if you need that, you need this. Up next, we have the debut album from Tracy Guns and Jack Russell with Russell Guns and Medusa. This album is actually a really fun throwback to 80s style, and unlike so many bands, especially when I was growing up, where you were an 80s band and you just decided to write nothing but acoustic ballads that were almost feeling like contemporary acoustic Christian music for some reason, this is just old school 80s hard rock, heavy metal, and AOR. I wouldn't want anything else from these guys, but they actually did this, which is what I wanted from the project. There's some nice heavy songs on here, there's some very, very intriguing ballads on here as well, but an overall feel that this is an album that they wanted to make together, and I'm so glad that they did. And if you are a little bit concerned about this, just give it a shot, especially if you love that 80s glam, hard rock, heavy metal sound. Up next is the debut album from this Barcelona band known as Santa Cruz, and their album, which I cannot pronounce, but I did find the English translation of Songs of Love, Grief, and Longing. Of course, I will have the real title in the description down below. But this album is absolutely stellar. It combines some great post-metal elements, some great doom metal elements, some black gaze a little bit in there as well. So if you're looking for something that kind of has like an Alcest feel but doomier, if you're looking for something like Cult of Luna but done in a little bit of a different style, if you're looking for some Lantlos kind of thing going on, there's something to be found in there in strides. Again, I don't really understand what's going on lyrically, but you can kind of get the idea from the English translation that there is a lot of love, loss, and what to do with life. And of course, I'm always there for that. Next up is an early contender for Album of the Year 2024, and yes, it is only the end of January, but we'll see what happens. This is Segale with Traverse the Baylock, and this is an absolutely killer album from this one-man project. Of course, being in bands like Fallock and Seor, there's a little bit of that folkish black metal element going on, but it's more in the background this time around. It's really focused more on kind of progressive metal, progressive post-metal, doom metal. It's a really cool combination. I can hear Catatonia in this, I can hear Borknagar in this. especially in the vocals. The final track has a huge Devin Townsend feel behind it. It's a real love letter to progressive metal through a more northern UK black metal feel behind it, but with all clean vocals. And that's right up my alley, and wouldn't you know it, it could be up yours as well. Seriously, give this one a shot. First up, we have the brand new album from Mirath with Karma. I can't believe this album's already coming out today, and it's been an album that's been in the works for quite some time. Obviously, some big changes happened with the band, not just in lineup-wise, but also musically as well. Some of the old-school Mirath fans may not appreciate what they're hearing here because it is much more accessible, it is much more commercial, and a bit more stripped down than before. But on the other hand, this is a great gateway album for people to actually start to appreciate Mirath that don't already know the power and glory that they already bring. There's so much to this album that I enjoy, and it's strange to me because on the first listen, it took me a little bit, but then I finally understood what they were going for. If this is an album that can really work, this could be an album that really makes them be able to have a chance to be able to tour in North America. And isn't that all what we want? Seriously. Give this one a shot. Next up, we have Striker with Ultra Power, the return album from this band, and I do mean a return album, because after making 6 albums in 8 years, the band decided to quietly and unofficially break up, but they got back together with a brand new lineup. In fact, 3/5 of the lineup is brand new for this recording, and the band brought some brand new magic to the band. Of course, it continues on with that traditional metal, heavy metal, revival metal sound, but they start to bring in influences of synthwave, some really crunchy, heavy guitar, and did I hear a scream or two throughout this album? I think I did. I'm so curious to see where the band's going to be going from here. This is the most diverse Striker album to date, and if this is the direction that they're going in, I couldn't be more satisfied. First up for what I missed is the band External with their debut album, Dreamscapes. Now, this was a recommendation for me, and this has so much of what I love about modern prog today. The band is taking ideas that have been used over the past 15-20 years or so, but making them completely their own. Imagine a band like Leprous, Textures, and Haken all coming together to make some very bombastic prog. Sometimes it gets into that progressive metalcore, or gent, as a lot of people like to call it, but unless that's a big minus for you, I think you can get over it pretty quickly. Because there's so much diversity throughout this album, the vocals are absolutely insane, the musicianship absolutely top notch, and this might be a very underground prog metal album, and I don't want it to be. I want people to check this thing out, and I want to see this band skyrocket. The only way that can happen is if you check it out. Up now is the band Contact, with a K, with their debut album, First Contact. Now, this album is absolutely bonkers. Imagine the band Voivod making music in the style of Motorhead, and then deciding to also write some of the biggest 80s riffs this side of Dokken. And you have a bit of a description of what Contact is all about. And it even goes into more extremes, like there's a ton of double bass and blast beats going on here, falsetto vocals. It's an absolutely insane album, but again, if you love what Voivod does, and you want to see them go into much different directions in an alien-like form, this is an album you must check out. I think this is going to rank pretty high in my top 100 albums of 2024, but we'll see what happens when that comes during the holiday. Next up is the band Lord Dying with Clandestine Transcendence, and a lot of people have been recommending this album, as I missed this in the January video, and I totally understand why. It's nice and sludgy like a band like Mastodon in its early days. It gets nice and doomy, but a little bit of thrashy as well, like a band like High on Fire, and it even hits some death metal territory as well. Not too much, just enough. And I appreciate what's going on here as well, because if you think sludge and doom is too slow, this is an album for you because it totally picks up the speed. If death metal is not really your thing and you wish it was kind of slower and more sludgier, this is an album for you. It's like the best of both worlds, and I truly appreciate it when a band can pull something like this off. I totally understand why everyone's going bonkers over this album, and yeah, I really appreciate it, and you just might as well if this is something that you're looking for. Coming up next, we got the band Mago de Oz with Alicia and El Metaverso. I wish I could could understand things a little bit better on here so I could get the full context. But with all of that said, I really, really enjoy this album. If you like Spanish flavored power metal, folk metal, it's got a little bit of a Celtic feel as well too, and a big old musical rock opera feel behind it. That's what this album brings. From what I understand, I think this is a concept album about Alice in Wonderland, but done a little more twisted and a little more metal, and I can always appreciate that. There's some doomy moments on here, there's like full-blown rock opera moments going on, fast, slow, everything that you could love about Mago de Oz. And if that sounds like that's something up your alley, and of course if you're not from America, you probably already know them, but just in case you don't, seriously, give this album a shot and, get more into the cultural stew of what all of the metal verso is all about. Up next, we have the brand new album from Manticora with Mycelium, and this really feels like a return to form with the band while sounding absolutely fresh and inspired. I might even go as far to say this might be my favorite Manticora album to date, although it just came out, so I don't know if I can definitely say that, but hear me out. This is progressive power metal done right with a little more extreme elements that happen occasionally on here and some of the most melodic and super catchy riffs that you're going to hear in 2024, especially in this style. If you're not familiar with the band, imagine a band like Nevermore or Symphony X or something combined together to create something very, very dark. And I always appreciated that about Manticora, and they're doing that stronger than ever. Of course, with a new lineup change, that's going to make things a little bit different, but I think for any longtime fan of the band, this might be your favorite album of 2024. Up next is the Washington, D.C. tri-state area band Sacricide, with their debut album, Nearer the Flame. And this really surprised me. It's a nice throwback to that early 2000s second wave of metalcore sound, but it's updated enough with some deathcore elements, a little bit of prog and extreme elements going on there for good measure. And of course, melodies and harmonies up the yin-yang. This is some really cool stuff here, and I appreciate the fact that as much brutality is on this album, they balance it out with melodic moments, so it's got a little bit of everything. And especially for being a debut album, that is a nice throwback, but still so current. I hope a lot of people will be able to check this band out, because if you miss out on this and you're a metalcore, deathcore, extreme metal fan, I think you'll be missing out on this. Seriously. Go check it out. And finally today, for what I missed, it is the sophomore album from Vitriol, Suffer and Become. This ticks all the marks that I'm looking for in extreme metal, and their debut album was sensational and one of the best extreme metal albums that came out that year. But many years have gone by, and it's time for that sophomore album, and they got even more brutal, more extreme. Imagine the best of Nile, Hate Eternal, Anal Nathrak, and of course Vitriol themselves, and they put out one of the most brutal albums of 2024 with insane technicality, jaw-dropping musicianship, the songwriting is impeccable, and it's got the right amount of melodic moments going on there throughout all of it. Seriously, this is just one of those albums that I think come the end of the year, everyone is going to be going crazy for as the best extreme metal album of 2024, and if I'm wrong, I'd be happy to be proven wrong, but until then, seriously, give this one a shot. First up, we have the third album from Morbid Saint, with Swallowed by Hell. Yes, this third album from the band might be a surprise because they are a long-running band, and they sound like one of those legacy bands that have a mountain of music, but with this only being the third album, they really show that it's all about quality, not quantity. And I dare say, after having the album as long as I have, and with future feelings, I feel like this is the best Morbid Saint album to date. And I know that might be heresy to some, but listen, it's got amazing production, the songwriting is spectacular, it feels like there's so much life to the band on this album in 2024. And what's a better way to be able to show off one of the best thrash underground bands that has almost a sense of death metal to them than to be able to praise them the way that they deserve. This is Morbid Saint at their best. Coming up next, we got the brand new album from the Pineapple Thief with It Leads to This. This seminal prog band is still going strong after 16 albums, and it's just amazing to see. Imagine a prog alternative mix, so kind of like Porcupine Tree meets Radiohead, and all those kind of bands all morphed together, but the Pineapple Thief was one of the first bands to do it right. And for some reason, this album feels like they cut off some of the fat on this album, which is strange to say because it clocks in at roughly the same time as most of their other albums at around 40 minutes throughout their entire discography. But this time, again, it just feels right. It's hard-hitting, it's straight to the point, it's emotional, it's everything that you would want out of a Pineapple Thief album. And I just can't say it any better than that. This is how you do prog rock right. Listen to it for yourself. Next up, we have the debut album from Red Temple Prey with Can It Get Any Worse? It's got this great alternative rock, alternative metal, shoegaze kind of feel to it. Musically, it reminds me of more of the somber, slow, mid-tempo moments of Torch, without getting into the doom stuff. More of the shoegaze era of Torch, which I truly appreciate what they're going on here for. I'm sure there's more like 90s alternative bands you could compare them to, but I like saying Torch for this reason. It's a somber album, it's a lot of coming of age kind of moments going on, which I truly appreciate, and just kind of the state of the world that we're living in right now, both personal and worldwide. It's not every day you get an album like this, and I love seeing where the band is at. The most mellow album that I probably have the entire list, but it's well worth your time if you want to explore. Coming up next is a sophomore album from Spectral Voice known as Sporagmos, and this is my introduction into the band, and all I can say is holy crap, what an album. It captures what I love about the death doom sound. It gets into extreme territories at the same time. It's polar opposites that feels like it shouldn't work, but they find a way to really make it so. I mean, it gets into near funeral doom territory at moments. It gets into hyperspeed, hyperblast metal at times as well. And of course, the lyrical content really makes you think. Everything about this album is something that I appreciate as an extreme metal fan. And if you're not familiar with this Denver outfit, I really think you should give them a chance. It covers the wide spectrum of metal in such a great way to the extremes. And if you need something like that in your life, you need this album. Is the brand new album from Stygian Crown with Funeral for a King. This album is another one of those doom albums that caught me completely off guard, and I love it so much for that reason. It's got that great epic doom feeling behind it, yet it almost goes into slow, brutal death metal at the same time. I guess the way you can describe this is, imagine the epicness of the Epicus, Doomicus, Metallicus of something like Candlemass, but match it up sometimes with the precision and musicality of Bolt Thrower. There's no screams on this album, it's all clean vocals, but just imagine that musically. It doesn't feel like it should fit, but it fits together so perfectly. This is the kind of album that if you're not a Doom fan, but you are a death metal fan, I think you can find something to appreciate about this album, and hopefully, the rest of the metal world will agree. And finally, for the albums that come out today, is the brand new album from Takeda with the Agony Flame. This is my first round with the band, and it's awesome to see what they're able to accomplish here. Apparently, over in Sweden, these guys are a big deal, but over here in the States, not that big of a commotion. Hopefully that'll change with this album review. All that said, I love what the band does here, at least particularly on this album. I'm gonna have to go back and check out the rest of it. This has like a really dark, almost gothic kind of feel behind it. I can hear bands like Sentenced and Him behind this album, yet I can also hear top 40 rock radio at the same time. It's such an interesting mix, and especially, at least to me, the keys really stand out the most to me on this album. If you're looking for something that could be radio rock, but just has a little bit of a goth tinge to it, you really need to check out Talk. And starting that off is the debut album from Ad Nihilum with An Escape for the Guilty. Now this is another one of those albums that goes into a lot of extremes in that blackened doom metal sound. Yeah, there's black metal, there's death metal, there's doom metal. It's all combined together in this glorious, unholy sound that just works so perfectly if you like things on the extreme end of things. You got your wicked double bass, you got your growls and screams, you got your slow, epic moments that you hear in doom metal, all combined together in a rock but clear production, songwriting that's absolutely mesmerizing, and a package that is not for the weak of heart. But for those that can really enjoy something like this has gotta be up your alley. Black and doom metal isn't the most accessible genre, but it should. Up next is the fourth album from the band Darkhaven, known as 4. Now, this is an album that is my first foray into the band, but I really love what they're doing here. I can hear 90s and 2000s melodeath going on here, but also at the right times, in the right choruses, I hear commercial top 40 hard rock. None of this should make sense, but it makes sense in all the right ways when you listen to it. It's so catchy, it could get people easily acceptable into metal if they're a rock fan, and vice versa. This is a great middle ground for showing people either side of the border when it comes to heavy music, and I'm all for that. Taking in mind the fact that the music's great, the production is cool, everything about this just hits in the right way. If you're looking for something that balances metal and rock perfectly, give this one a shot. Next up, we have the band Dead Yellow with their sophomore album, What's Left of Them. And this might be my favorite album of everything that I talk about today. This captures everything that I love about the atmospheric black metal, black gaze, post-black metal sound. I haven't been so intrigued by a black gaze album like this since Vetnet Viscar's Sky Swallower in 2013, and I hold that album to such a high regard. Of course, I hold Subtler even better than that, but I was already familiar with that. But let me continue on here. There's so much to love about this album. The production is so clear, but just raw enough. The precision of the musicianship is top notch. Everyone in the band is just playing absolutely killer, and this is what this style of black metal is all about. I'd be amazed if anyone can outdo this kind of black metal album in this style in 2024. And finally today, we're ending on some power metal with the Grandmaster and their sophomore album, Black Sun. Another brand new band to me anyways, as I should have known about this band considering the guitarist of Edguy is a part of this album, and it's an all-star cast from members of Fate, Mind's Key, and a huge name at Frontiers Music. All of this is right up my alley. This is just fun, heavy metal, melodic heavy metal, and of course, power metal. Just done to an absolute T. Lyrically, it hits the gut a little bit. It's about the times that we live in right now, but it's not silly. It's not too serious. It's right in the middle where it's just fun to listen to. And I miss power metal albums like this, where you can just have fun listening to it from start to finish. I easily need to go back to the debut, and you should check out the Grandmaster if you're looking for some fun power metal as well. First up, we have the brand new album from Bokassa, known as All Out of Dreams. This album took me by complete surprise. This is the first time I'm really familiar with the band, and I'm really enjoying what I'm hearing. It's fun, it's catchy, it can be fast as pop punk, it can be as slow as sludgy, stoner rock. It's got so many layers to it, and quite tongue-in-cheek when you think about it as well. It's the kind of album where they're not afraid to play what they want to play, write what they want to write, and it all comes off sounding fantastic. If you want something a little more lighthearted, but doesn't skimp on the musicianship, this is an album for you. Next up, we have the debut album from the Italian power metal band, Electra Storm, with Power Lord. And this album is a perfect display of what I love about power metal. Symphonic in the right moments, power metal of course, gorgeous vocals, the choruses, everything going on. This is why I enjoy power metal so much. From David of Sin Heresy, it's great to see him tackling a different side of his power metal and symphonic styles, really gauging into the power metal side, and I truly enjoy it. This is the kind of stuff where if you find power metal kind of lacking for different reasons, this is one that shows you that power metal will never truly die. Next up, we're sticking with Germany with the band Farsot and their brand new album, Life Promised Death. This black metal band has been around for a bit of time, and they just continuously improve with every single album. And I really feel that way about this one, as I do feel it is their best work to date. The production has that raw but perfect black metal sound behind it. The songwriting just works so perfectly. It has that great mix of old school black metal, a little bit of second wave black metal in there, and a couple other influences that you might hear as you check it out. There's a lot to also really appreciate about an album like this, and being a longtime Farsad fan, it's great to see the band continuing on here in 2024. And if you're not familiar, you need to check this thing out immediately. Next up, we have the third album from this German melodeath band known as Far Beyond, with The End of My Road. And yeah, if you haven't figured it out by the title alone, this is a very dark album. Perfectly matches that melodeath sound, a little bit of a raw production, but it does sound clear and pristine at the same time. The songwriting is excellent on this album. It's not a cheery album by any means, but if you love the sad melodeath stuff, this is going to be right up your alley. I've just discovered this band and I can't wait to go back and check out the previous releases. If they're anywhere near as good as this album, I know I'm sold on checking out some brand new melodeath. But until then, check this album out as it just came out today. It's some really good stuff. Up next, we have the self-titled album from Ihsahn. And this is arguably my favorite album of 2024 so far, although there's a lot of contenders already in January and February. But with all that said, this has those classic, progressive, experimental moments that I love so much from Ihsahn. But on top of all of that is this symphonic black metal element that won't go away, nor should it. It is just another side of Ihsahn being able to incorporate more of what he helped create with symphonic black metal, but of course being his abstract self. I couldn't ask for anything more, but he gave us more, as there's two discs to this album. One that does have the symphonic black metal sound, and one that is a symphonic album. Both are absolutely incredible and well worth your time if you check them out. Is this the best Ihsahn album? I think there's the potential that it is, but you'll have to give it a shot for yourself to see if it's for you. Up next is the sophomore album from Illumashade, with Another Side of You. And I really feel they live up to the album title this time around. As you may or may not know, this features present members of Helveti, and I really enjoy Helveti, but it's also great to see them being able to expand into other sounds as well instead of just folk metal. This album is full of like 80s AOR, it's filled with prog metal elements, it's filled with pop moments and very beautiful piano driven moments as well. It's kind of like when you combine 80s AOR, Haken, and Vanessa Carlton into one album. It's an odd mix on paper, but it's perfect in execution. Seriously, this might be an underground album for a lot of people, but you should definitely give this one a shot, as it just might be one of the best prog albums of 2023. Just give it some time. And finally, for the albums out today, this week, is the French band Sujin with Save Our Souls. This album is very intriguing to me, as it combines melodic death metal, Japanese influence, and metalcore all combined. It's like you take the best elements of melodeath and metalcore, and you have this great Japanese influence on top of all of it that really gives it a unique twist that you don't see in a lot of other bands. The songs are so catchy, the riffs are insane. This is the kind of band that I can just see flourishing in years to come. But right here, with this debut album, it is some fantastic work. I can understand why it wouldn't be for everybody, but if you are a bit more open-minded than the rest, you should give this one a shot, and you might find a new favorite band. Up first is the debut album from this Mexican band known as Bright, with Blight. This album is a deranged combination. It is post-black, but it is also the epitome of shoegaze at the same time. Now, a lot of people would think it's black gaze, and you are probably right, but I hear so much shoegaze over top of the black metal, and I hear black metal moments over the shoegaze at the same time. It feels like such a contrast compared to a lot of atmospheric black metal, post-black, and shoegaze-inspired black metal bands. This band does it right where it almost has that great alternative tinge to black metal. Now, that could throw some people off, but for those that might have some interest in this, I really think you should give this album a shot. It won't be for everyone, but if you want one of the most relaxing black metal albums of 2024, here you go. Up next is the sophomore album from Deathless with The Clairvoyant. Now, this is pure American melodeath, and I mean that in the best way possible, but you also gotta understand, like, there is pure Black Dahlia worship on this album, there's pure Revocation worship on this album, but the band also expands their sound on this album compared to their debut. You hear more elements of what the band is trying to go for, more of the styles that really change the tempo tempo up and the style and everything that's going on. But of course, that American Melodeath sound is here in strides. All of that said, I love American Melodeath. I love what they're doing here. Thrashy enough, death metal enough, progressive and technical enough, and super melodic in the right moments. What else could you possibly ask for in a genre like this? Seriously, check this album out. Up next is some brand new epic doom from the debut album from Distorted Reflection with Doom Rules Eternally. And yes it does. This is an awesome combination of epic doom metal, as there's a lot of bands that do epic doom metal that really draw inspiration from Candlemass, and I'm all here for it as they are the masters of epic doom metal. But they do something with a little bit of a twist. There's more variation in the sound, there's more variation in the tempo, and the vocals remind me so much of Hansi from Blind Guardian. It's a really odd mix to think of Candlemass and Blind Guardian together, but when you hear it, it works so perfectly well. Even those who don't like doom can find something to appreciate about this album. Seriously, this one's flying under the radar, but I'm here to try to give a little more inspiration for you to check it out. Seriously. This is fantastic stuff. And finally, we have some more black metal for you with the band The Infernal Sea with Helfenlick. I actually did an interview for this album, which you can check out on this very channel, and I hope you do, as it is a very cool interview to be able to learn so much more about the horrors of the past, something we should be learning about now. And wouldn't you know it, that is the concept of this album as well, focusing around the madman known as Witchfinder General, and all of the murders in his name and in the name of God. Match that up with some of the most dark, evil black metal you can imagine, sorrowful emotions, and lyrics that are just so vivid they play in your head as you hear the songs. This is not an album for the faint of heart, but if you are a black metal fan who loves great production, learning about the past, or even if you just have a fancy for religious murder, this might be an album for you. First up, we have the 7th album from Amaranth, known as The Catalyst. The band has been quite polarizing over the years for their display of modern metal, pop, and everything else that goes into their sound. The band has experimented many times over the course of their albums, but I gotta feel like this album is probably the most consistent album the band has made. Olaf, Elise, and company have really focused in on what works for the band, really making poppy, catchy riffs, getting heavy at the right moments, and just showing that they can have fun while doing all of it. While I'm not sure how this will rank as far as like the best Amaranth album, if you are into the band, this should give you nothing but a good time. Next up, we have Borknagar with Fall. Can you believe this is the band's 12th album? I have a hard time believing that, but there goes the ravages of age. This is possibly the most experimental the band has gotten in quite some time. You get the black metal side, you get the folk metal side, you get the heavy metal and progressive metal sides going on, but there's so much more to it. There's so much atmosphere going on, and you can tell the band really wanted to come back strong after their last album. ICS Vortex is sounding as pristine as ever, and of course the rest of the band, how could you leave them out? This could be my favorite Borknagar album in time. It's a little too early to say that, but I think it will happen, and you'll see it pretty high up in my top 100 albums of 2024. Next up, we have Darkest Hour with Perpetual Terminal. I can't believe this is the band's 10th album. Again, this year is really showing that bands of my generation have put out a lot of albums. But I will say with Darkest Hour, this might be one of the best albums that they've ever put out. You can tell the pandemic really affected them, and they really wanted to strive to be the best band that they possibly could be. And on album number 10, they've done so. The riffs are so hard-hitting, the lyrics are so angry and emotional. You can really hear the metalcore sound of yesteryear and what's going on today with the band. They focus in on what they do best, and they just put out that killer second wave metalcore that we all know and love. Darkest Hour might not be the biggest name of that second wave metalcore scene, but they've always been one of my favorites, and you should check them out. Up next, we have Hand of Kaliak with Kareviken, and I really, Really hope I pronounced that right. Yes, this sophomore album from this duo is fantastic stuff if you love folk metal, especially of the early 21st century folk metal, kind of along the lines of a band like Helveti. I really hear a lot of Spirit and Solania on this album, which makes me very, very happy. Yes, the black metal sound, the folk metal sound, the very gorgeous vocals mixed in with the demonic vocals just work so perfectly together. It feels like the best of Scotland all thrown in together. While this album may be going under the radar for some people, it shows that folk metal is still just as strong as ever in 2024, even if you have to look for it just a little bit more. Seriously, if you need your folk metal fix, this is the album for you. Next up, we have the return album from Job for a Cowboy with Moon Healer. This comes out 10 years later, after the band might have broken up after the album Sun Eater. Well, a lot of things have changed, and I'm glad to see the band back, putting out their most mature album to date. Of course, being one of the first bands to really be known for the deathcore sound, the band has really evolved into this technical, progressive death metal sound that really harkens back all the way to the 90s prog death sound into brand new stuff that you would not imagine from the band. Everyone is technical and precise on this album. The production is so perfect for this genre, and it's great to see the band back, because if the band had ended on Sun Eater, they did end on their top note, but they have come back and they might have even peaked over that. Time will tell. But until then, if you've been waiting for this band to come back, or if you just need some great technical progressive death metal, Job for a Cowboy's here with Moon Healer. Up next is Vina with 2 Wings of Ember. This is another side project from Helveti. Funny how I talked about Illumishade last week, and now we're talking about Tvina, and I really enjoy what's going on here. Kind of a polar opposite sound than what you would expect from either band. It's a bit more folkish, but it also incorporates a lot of different styles, mainly kind of focusing on like ancient folk sounds, very Celtic sounds going on as well, very tribal, but it all fits together. It's very poppy, very catchy, and as you go throughout the album, there's a lot of experimentation going on. And it's great to see the other members of Helveti being able to really spread their wings and be able to show different sides of themselves. That said, we still need a new Helveti album ASAP. But if you liked Illumishade, you might like Tvina. Hey, it's some great stuff. Next up, we have the brand new album from Art of Anarchy with Let There Be Anarchy. Now, this band has gone through so many transitions over the years. The first album featured Scott Weiland on vocals, one of his last vocal appearances. The second album featured Scott Stapp, who is now back with Creed. Now this third album, also having to have a Scott in the name, Jeff Scott Soto is now the lead singer of the band, and it feels like the band got tremendously heavier, almost kind of going off of Sons of Apollo, which Bumblefoot and Jeff Scott Soto were a part of at one point in time. This album is also super catchy as well too, but it's a lot more cinematic, a lot more heavy, not so much on the prog side, but going after the heavy metal side. And one of their singles features Cuba Gooding Jr. in an acting role. Bet you didn't see that one coming. Overall, I do enjoy this album, and I love the direction that Bumblefoot has taken this, but where are they going to go next? Up next is the third album from In Autumn with What's Done Is Done. Now, this is a brand new discovery to me, and you know how much I love my doom metal. This is some fantastic stuff, really encapsulating that doom metal sound, but also adding some atmospheric post-metal on top of it as well. It really adds some great atmosphere and cinematic moments on top of some tragedy, which is right up my alley. This whole album is downtrodden, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And for those that are looking for that doom metal sound, but want a little bit more variety than what you're used to, I think this is an album that you should really give a shot. And finally today, we have the brand new album from Vanir with Epitome. This album took me by complete surprise, as this is the first time I've heard the band, and I really regret that, as I really need to go back and check out the 6 previous albums. Starting off as more of a Viking metal band and becoming more of a symphonic melodeath band, this is something that should have been right up my alley from the get-go, and wouldn't you know it, with Epitome, it truly is. I love everything that's going on here, from the epic choruses, the symphonic moments, that melodeath sound of that 90s melodeath sound matched in with some more 2024 flavorings. I couldn't ask for anything more off of an album like this. It just captures so much of what I love about these genres, with great production, songwriting, and technical ability. If you're looking for something a bit more underground, unless you're completely stupid like I am and completely missed the boat with Vanir, you need to check out Epitome. First up, we have Blind Channel with Exit Emotions. And if you want to hear a bit more insight into this album, make sure to go check out my interview with Blind Channel on this very channel. The band is pretty much outside of my wheelhouse for the most part. Violent pop, nu metal, some alternative rock stuff. It's not necessarily my bag. But when these guys do it, they do it in a way that is fun to listen to from start to finish. Think of them as kind of like a Finnish version of Electric Callboy, and you'll start to get the idea. It's just fun, it's heavy, they tackle some real stuff going on in this album, and on this particular album they get some outside help with some outside writers and guest appearances, all to make the music the best that it possibly can be. And for someone who usually just sticks to metal, this stuff is very enjoyable, and it just might be for you as well. Next up, we have Devastator with Conjurers of Cruelty. This is my kind of black metal, thrash metal, black and roll, all combined together just to create some fun black metal to listen to from start to finish. Think of bands like Midnight and you start to get into the right direction here, but of course Devastator does it in its own way. The songs are short, sweet, the album is just filled to the brim with great black and roll, black thrash, the perfect production for this style, and lyrical content that really adds up. Everything about this album simply rules, and if you love black and roll and black thrash, you need to check this album out. Coming up now is the 10th album from Firewind, known as Stand United. And with a band like Firewind, you would think that they would have a lot more albums than 10, but they're all about the consistency and quality over quantity. Of course, Firewind is that very consistent sound of power metal, heavy metal, and Gus G's ferocious guitar style, and you get that in spades here on this album. You also get George from War Drum taking over the helm for Firewind in the vocal category, who fits in just perfectly. This is another great album in the band's discography, and it really doesn't need to stand out from the crowd because all of Firewind's work just works so good on its own merit. And if you're looking for some just great, consistent power metal and hard rock, the brand new Firewind album will be. Next up is Metro Society with the London Conspiracy Chapter 1, 1898. Now, this is a brand new band to me, and I think it's because their debut album came out the year I graduated in 2007. But what I hear here on the sophomore album is very, very intriguing to me, combining the best elements of progressive metal, creating a very interesting concept, and leaving you wanting more, especially with it being Chapter 1. I'm very curious to see where the rest of this thematic piece goes. But for here, there's a lot of great heavy moments going on here. The production is a bit raw, but I think it really fits for the style of music, and it's just some great prog metal. And if you're looking for something that's a little more on the underground side for that, give this one a shot. Up next, we have Suicidal Angels with Profane Prayer. The 8th album from this Greek thrash band shows the band coming out of the pandemic much more mature, wiser, but keeping that consistent sound of thrash that they love so very much. Of course, there's some dynamics on this album, but you know what you're getting with the Suicidal Angels album, and it's pummeling, it's meant right from the heart, and the lyrical content is a bit more varied on this album about the world around us. So if you want a little bit of a history lesson mixed in with your Slayer-infused thrash metal, this is an album that must be coming up on your radar. Now is Salt Dusk with Antithesis. This sophomore album from Emily Hightower is an amazing display of how you do black metal, folk metal, and combine so many different layers of different styles of music to combine some of the most evil sounding but beautiful sounding music out there in 2024. On the debut album, Emily did everything herself. On this one, it is a full-on band, and you can really hear the different layers of different influences going on throughout this album, but that does not take away from the Salt Dusk sound, and it just makes everything feel richer and fuller. This is a surprise album for me, and I'm gonna go back and check out the debut album after this one, because I thoroughly enjoy what's going on with this. And if you need something of that folk black metal sound, you will love this album. I guarantee it. And finally, for brand new albums that come out today, I have Volcandra with The Way of Ancients. This is a brand new discovery for me, and it might be my discovery of the year. Well, at least for bands that have put out more than one album. This album contains everything that I love about metal black, folk metal, melodeath, progressive sides, and so much more. There's so much melody and harmony to this album amongst all the brutality, the evil sounds, and everything else that's going on with the band. Combine that with some American songwriting, combine that with some brutal moments, and you get one of the most fascinating metal albums of 2024. This one's gonna rank very, very high in my top 100 albums of 2024, and it only gets better with every repeat listen. First up for this is the band Counting Hours with The Wishing Tomb. This sophomore album from this near doom supergroup features members of Shape of Despair, Rapture, The Chant, and Cinnabon Urn. And this is everything that I love about doom metal. Thankfully, due to a recommendation, I got to check this one out, and this is by far one of my favorite doom metal albums of 2024 so far. It combines that great funeral doom, gothic doom, melodic doom style that I love so very, very much, with very deep, hard-hitting lyrics, profane production, and just everything that you would want in this style. If you want to hear what all of these members of these bands are doing outside of their main projects, you need to check out Counting Hours. You'll be glad that you did. Coming up next is My Darkest Time with Fragile. Now, this album is an absolute paradox to me, because it's gothic doom metal, death doom metal, and Christian music? Yeah, bet you didn't see that coming, did ya? Well, unless you already knew the band. But My Darkest Time combines Christian elements of the darkest times and finding salvation in this style of doom metal. Now, it won't be for everybody, and it'd be crazy to think it would be, but for those with curious minds, you should give this one a shot. As for myself, I listen to everything from Neil Morse to Rotting Christ, so religious matters don't affect me positively or negatively when it comes to music. I just want to enjoy good stuff, and this is some good stuff here. The vocals won't be for everybody, but if you do enjoy it, you will love it. Awesome production, and stuff that makes you think. Give this one a shot for all inquiring minds. And finally, my biggest blunder of the week, for forgetting it last week, it is North Sea Echoes with their debut album, Really Good, Terrible Things. Ray Alder and Jim Matheos back together from not creating music with Fate's Warning to create something very different here. It's got some great ambient moments, some progressive moments. One song gets particularly heavy, and of course, the emotional lyrical content of Ray Alder is here in strides. I love this album to death, and it's not in my normal wheelhouse of enjoying much more heavier music, but I love this album. It really makes you think. It's really good for your mental health when you're feeling low and it feels like you need something that matches up with it. It's great to hear Jim and Ray writing again, and I just can't wait to see what's next. First up, we have the debut album from the Toronto band Apogene with Cyberstrictive. Now, this, of course, is on the label The Artisan Era, and if you're familiar with the label, you know what you're going to get here. High quality, top-notch, technical death metal. If that's not for you, I completely understand. But Apogene really does do something that I really appreciate here. There's a lot of peaks and valleys within the music. Of course, it's super technical. It can turn on the turn of a dime. There's so many things that are going on with it, but they really know how to write songs, and they know how to show off that masterclass musicianship without just showing wankery. And Max Smith, formerly of Croesus, is the lead singer of this band, and it's incredible to see what he can do outside of Croesus. If you need some new tech death, and if you need something from the Artisan Era, you need to check out Apogene. Next up, we have the legendary band Exhorder with Defectum Omnium. This is the band's fourth album since 1990, and once you know it, they only have 4 albums to their name, but I feel like the band just keeps improving on age. Slaughter at the Vatican is one of the most influential thrash and groove metal albums of all time. In fact, a certain band decided to go along with that entire genre and flip to what they used to do and started going in this style. Wouldn't you know it? I bet you can figure out who it is. But no, seriously folks, Exhorder is back, and they're just putting out some killer music here, with a lot of great punk and hardcore influences mixed in with their thrash and groove metal. It's very aggressive, very left-wing from what I got from it, and I appreciate that. Thoughts and prayers all over this album. This thing rules. And I'm so happy to see the band still together in 2024, rocking just as hard as they did back in 1990. If you want to prove that legacy bands can still put out some of the best albums out there, check this thing out. Next up, we have the Metal Blade debut of Ghost with Prophecy. This is a one-man project who covers such a wide gamut, and it's for the metalhead and the non-metalhead alike. If you love 80s synthwave, there's something here for you. If you love horror soundtracks, of course that's here. If you love industrial, oh yeah, there's plenty of that. And if you're looking for something on the extreme side of metal, wouldn't you know it, that's here too. It's a conglomerate of all of it. And it all makes sense, and it doesn't sound like a giant hodgepodge. It works to perfection. This album feels like the soundtrack to an album I've never seen, but I really, really want to. If your love goes from John Carpenter to Anil Nathrak, you're finding something in my heart. This album rules, and yes, it is an instrumental album. I think it's really beneficial to the music. There's a reason why Ghost is getting so much claim to fame lately. Why don't you go check them out for yourself and understand why? Next up, we have Midnight with Hellish Expectations. This album was written in retaliation to their previous album, Let There Be Witchery, and you can really tell. The songs are shorter, sweeter, only comes in at 25.5 minutes, and it's some of the best material the band has ever done. The songs are just absolutely killer from start to finish. It's everything that you love about the black and roll, black thrash, and rock and roll styles that Midnight has always been known for. And of course their love of Motorhead will always shine through. Seriously, Midnight is one of the greatest bands on Metal Blade Records, and this album just proves that you don't even need a half hour to prove the power of what Midnight is all about. And finally, for the brand new music that comes out today, it is the brand new album from Sonata Arctica with Clear Cold Beyond. Now, I bet you're surprised that I'm talking about this album because, you know, obviously in the last 15, almost 20 years, Sonata hasn't really been doing the power metal thing. They've been going in a much more theatrical, hard rock, and, I mean, they went into a lot of different directions. But here we go. In 2024, Sonata Arctica is back to writing a full-on power metal album, and the world can finally rejoice. Yes, this is easily the best album that they've done in a very, very long time, and I would say it easily beats everything once they stopped doing power metal. Even a song that's still very tongue-in-cheek, like California, can be funny and awesome at the same time. You love the double bass, you love the guitar chugging, you love the grand keyboard wizardry, and of course, Tony Kakko's amazing vocals. Everything that you loved about Sonata Arctica is back. First up, we have Blood Opera with songs in the key of death. This album is just pure fun from start to finish. But of course, you really have to be into the 80s and 90s cheesy horror metal to really appreciate this. Now I'm talking about that down and dirty B-grade grindhouse horror. If you like that, plus you love 80s music, this has everything in strides. You got horror songs that are about The Omen, The Fly, Candyman. They got Tony Todd to do the intro to the song Be My Victim, which is all about Candyman. That tells you everything you need to know right there. And of course throughout it, there is a skit story going on talking about the creation of Blood Opera, the band Blood Opera, and them coming back to life to, well, I won't spoil it for you. But if you love your cheesy 80s, 90s metal, and you love that grindhouse horror, this is meant for you. Next up, we have Electric Deathbeat with a Ghost Triangle. I tried talking about this last week, but the footage went missing somehow, some way, so I'm doing it now. This album is something that took me by surprise, because there's a lot of bands that are doing the modern metal, melodic death metal thing going on. Too many to mention in a short thing here, but Electric Deathbeat does it quite a bit different. Imagine a much more brutal soil work. Like Speed really got his gutturals going, where it almost sounds like it's like grindcore, brutal death metal. But you also mix that in with some of the finest cleans I've heard all year, and also just a magnificent display of musicianship and songwriting going on throughout all of it. This is an awesome album. The production might be not in some people's favor, but I personally dig it, and if you want a great modern take on modern metal, but just a tad bit more brutal, you should give this one a shot. Next up, we have the brand new album from Haunt with Dreamers. I can't believe I'm saying this. This is the 10th brand new album from Haunt, and the band started in 2017. That is absolutely insane to me. But what is also absolutely insane? How good this album is. It is the perfect display of heavy metal, revival metal, and just what Haunt has been doing ever since its inception. Trevor is just one of the best songwriters in this genre, and the fact that he pretty much puts out an album or two every single year just blows my mind. And what makes this one stand out from the other ones? I easily gotta say it, it's the production. On so many of Haunt's albums in the past, it has that raw sound, but it sounds good. On this one, there's no denying the incredibility of everything that's going on in the production on this album, and it makes everything stand out. This is the perfect album to check out Haunt, and even though it's not on Spotify yet, go everywhere else and check this album out. Next up is Louise Lamont with Lifetime of Tears. This album took me by complete surprise, and I just discovered it this past week despite the fact that it came out in February. It's always why I'm glad I check out Bandcamp to see some stuff that I might have missed along the way. This is listed as death gospel, and I totally understand why. There's elements that aren't really death metal but deals with the idea of death, and it's done through an electronic rock, alternative rock, soul, R&B kind of feel, also with some Swedish ingredients mixed on top. This feels like a very ceremonious, dark, cathartic album of like sitting in a graveyard and getting your emotions out. It's such a strange display if you are a metalhead and you've never heard anything like this before, but you really should give this a shot if you want something that's adjacent to metal, but really feels like it's from the heart. And finally today, to make things very, very wacky, it is the return of Sleepytime Gorilla Museum with Of the Last Human Being. The band has finally returned after 17 years. Yes, it has been since 2007, and oh, that's the year I graduated high school. Time really does fly, doesn't it? But on a better note, this album is absolutely insane in all the right ways. It's everything that I've loved about the band since I was in high school, and everything that they've learned from their experiences along the way. Everything you love about the band is here in their avant-garde style. It is just as smart and quirky and absolutely insane with musicianship as you could want. The fact that this album came out and they're going to be doing a full-fledged tour going on right now is just incredible to me. Go support Sleepytime Gorilla Museum if you want something left to the left of center. Coming up first is the band Aborted with Vault of Horrors. Aborted is one of my favorite brutal and extreme metal bands, and they have shined once again with Vault of Horrors. Being able to showcase a different horror movie and a different guest appearance on every song, featuring members from Despised Icon, Flesh God Apocalypse, Shadow of a Tent, and so much more. There's so much going on with this album. A lot more melodic moments than you would necessarily expect in a band like this. Of course, all the brutality and extreme moments that you would imagine from a band are covered throughout this album, but it's just so great to see all the different takes on all these different movies. Of course, the singles have the things like The Thing, and it's so fantastic to see them going in this direction. My personal favorite Aborted album is Terror Vision, but the more that I listen to this album through and through, it's very possible this could be my favorite Aborted album of all time. But we just have to get there. Until then, enjoy this album. Coming up next is a debut album from this New Orleans band known as Brat with Social Grace. This is grindcore, death grind, power violence, or as they like to refer to themselves as, bimbo violence. This debut LP is all over the map, going from great hardcore moments to pure power violence insanity, with this kind of grace behind it, no pun intended, that is very, very intriguing. Of course, in that grind and power violence style, the album is 10 songs long and 20 minutes in length. This is well worth your time if you enjoy that style of music, and you really need a good kick of that power violence and death grind sound in 2024. This band takes it in a completely different direction, and it feels so appropriate for what they do. I can't wait to see what's next. Next up, we have Dragon Force with their brand new album, Warp Speed Warriors. If you already don't like the band, I'm pretty sure you're not going to like them here. If you already love the band, you're probably going to enjoy this album as well. But that is not to say that this album is just another Dragon Force album. It's a bit of a different direction here. And I'm still trying to figure out my thoughts on it, but I will say I enjoy when they do harken back into the power metal sound that I knew them and loved them for. But also at the same time, they have really fallen into the meme and influencer style. Like, the fact that Herman Lee is a gigantic influencer in the metal community heavily affects this album. You can see it in the music videos, you can see it in the writing style, and all of the guests on the album. It's poppier, it's catchier, but it does have those power metal metal moments thrown in. If that sounds like your kind of party, you might enjoy this album. Coming up now is probably the most avant-garde album I'm going to be checking out all year, because this thing is so left to the left of center, I really don't know how to describe it. It is an album known as La Suspendia, consisting of members of Kilter, Andromeda Anarchia, Growler's Crier, and Seven Sons. This album is so strange to me. It is something that I can't even describe on YouTube without getting flagged when it comes into the lyrical sense, but musically, imagine a mix of the most avant-garde experimental stuff mixed in with metal, jazz, contemporary, and modern music, all mixed together to create an opera that is a monologue. If this sounds like something that you are willing to experiment with, I implore you to check this out because there's some amazing stuff going on here. But this album is not for the faint of heart. Tread lightly, but feel free to trend. Next up, we have Lords of Black with Mechanics, a Predacity. Ronnie Romero and company are doing some amazing work here with the more heavy metal and classic metal inspired side of what he does, and of course the rest of the band being able to show off that hard rock, heavy metal, and power metal side. This album is another slab of why I enjoy Lords of Black so much, from the tremendous vocal display, the amazing songwriting, production that just fits so perfectly well, and a good look into the world from the past, the present, and what could be the future. Lords of Black always knocks it out of the park, and I'm glad to see they have not lost touch here in 2024. They're continuing to go strong, and I can't wait for the next album already. This is some fantastic stuff, and if you've never checked out Ronnie Romero, you need to check this thing out immediately. Up next is the band Lutharo with Chasing Euphoria. This is my first foray into the band, and I gotta say, I think I found one of my new favorite albums of 2024. This combines everything that I love in the styles that they're going for. It is mellow death, it is power metal, just a little bit of prog, just a little bit of thrash, and some of the catchiest, heaviest moments that I've heard in this style. There's something about Canada being able to do melodic death and power metal so very well. I'm not sure what it is, but they do it amazingly well, and you need to check it out for yourself. Everyone a part of this band is doing phenomenally, amazing production, again, such catchy material on this album. I hope Lutharo makes it far, and they have been growing ever since their debut album. I can't wait to see where they go from here. I got Ultimas with their sophomore album, Epic. This three-piece supergroup is consisting of David Vincent, Flo Monnier, and Blasphemer, and they create the perfect blend of catchy, almost melodic, but downright evil black and death metal. And that's something we can all go for in 2024. The musicianship on this album is absolutely extreme and so catchy at the same time. I don't know how they pulled this off. David Vincent, especially after talking about how he doesn't like indecipherable vocals, really puts on a very clear growl display, so you understand everything that he's saying. And of course, the music on its own stands on its own. This could have been an upstart band and it would have been just as heavy and cool. Seriously, give Ultimas a chance. It might be flown under the radar, but you need to give it a shot. And finally, for brand new albums that came out today, I have the debut album from Whom Gods Destroy with Insanium. Bumblefoot and Derek Sherinian wanted to continue to work together after the implosion of Sons of Apollo, and they're really showing off the heavy progressive metal side here. And of course, they got the one and only Dino Jalusic on vocals here, and he is one of the best rock singers in the world today. This album goes across the board, getting as heavy as Meshuggah, getting as classic prog as like King Crimson, or even Deep Purple for more of a mainstream kind of feel. It goes all over the place, but it makes sense, it all works together, and of course it has that little bit of wackiness and quirkiness that I expect no less from this combination of people. And it's so different, and I mean that in the best way possible. Of course, Art of Anarchy just released an album a couple weeks ago which had Bumblefoot and Jeff Scott Soto, formerly of Sons of Apollo, so it's great to see this other side also seeing the light of day. First up, we have Grey Skies Fallen with Molded by Broken Hands. This is another favorite discovery for me in 2024, and I'm so glad that I found them because this is purely up my alley, especially with where my mental state is right now. This is dark, gloomy, gothic doom metal in the likes of November's Doom, My Dying Bride, and Opeth. So yeah, that's right up my alley. It's Americanized as well. It really has this great sense of feel behind it, excellent production. You can tell the band has gone through a lot of grief on this album, or they just really know how to write about it, and it just hits so close to home. I love everything about this. It knows when to speed up, it knows when to slow down, it knows when to write the best music possible. Gray Skies Fallen might be underrated for you. You may not have heard of them, but you need to give them a shot if you want to hear some great progressive-esque gothic doom metal. Next up, we have Intermissing with The Diary, and I can't believe the band is already 10 albums into their career, and The Diary is really showing some of the strongest moments the band has ever had. 6 tracks, all over 7 minutes long. Everything here just really has that gothic doom metal feel behind it. Heavy emphasis on the gothic and metal side of it. Of course, some doom along the way as well, and little herbs and spices from other things as well. But I thoroughly enjoy what really feels like what might be the most authentic Intermissing album to date. It's dark, it's brooding, it's a great reflection for where the band is at right now, and if you are into the gothic or doom territories, I implore you to check this album out. It is more than worthy of your time. Up next is the one-man project Notio with Worldview. Albert Olli from Finland has created such a super catchy, melodic, progressive metal album. It almost tinges onto the progressive death metal side, it almost hits into the power metal side, but everything in between works perfectly for this band. Albert's vocals have a little bit of a Hansi from Blind Guardian feel behind it. I'm not sure if that's intentional or that's just his vocal range, but I think it works so well with the music. And just being able to explore all these different territories into progressive metal and having such great production and songwriting behind it, this is an underutilized album, I really feel. Not a lot of people are talking about this, but you need to check this thing out if you're a modern prog fan. Seriously, there's amazing craftsmanship here, and you just might dig it for yourself. Up next, we have the 5th album from Skeletal Remains, Fragments of the Ageless. This is just the pure definition of death metal. While it does go into a little bit of different territory, sometimes a little more brutal than your normal death metal, sometimes a little bit more proggy than your normal death metal, it just really showcases everything that death metal can and should be. If you love the old school stuff like Obituary or Morbid Angel, that is throughout this entire album. If you want something a little more on the proggy side, you can definitely hear moments of like Pestilence or even early day Edge of Sanity going on here. And of course the band just experiments with their own influences and just really being themselves. The band just crafts another masterpiece after another masterpiece with every single album. And yeah, without question, this is the band's best album to date, and if you're just looking for that pure, genuine death metal, it doesn't get much better than Skeletal Remains in 2024. And finally, we have the 3rd album from the band Turbulence with Binary Dream. Now, you don't really think of Lebanon as the hotbed for progressive metal, gent, jazz, that kind of stuff. This album might turn things around when it comes to that. This album rules. I love the proficiency that's going on here. The band knows what influences to incorporate and what to be able to make of their own. Of course, the one thing that might throw some people off is about half of the album is instrumental. Some of the tracks are pure instrumental, but I think even if you don't enjoy instrumental music, you'll be able to find something to really appreciate here. And when the vocals do come through, they absolutely shine. Yes, this is a prog album through and through, with influences of gent and jazz and other stuff. But I really think you should give this a shot if you're looking for some new flavorings in your musical listening, because I think you'll find something here that you truly enjoy. First up today, we got Fur Gallico with Future to Come. This Italian power metal band's 4th album continues on with the trend of their Celtic power metal sound and folk metal, but it also shines a little bit more of what they're capable of. It's everything that you've loved about the band, but just a little bit more modernized, a little catchier. Production sounds fantastic, and really makes you want more of that folk metal sound that I wish was continuing on to this day. If you've never checked out this band before, but if you like the likes of Elvati, you'll find something to really appreciate here. Coming up next is the band Hamfer With an album title, I'm going to translate from Pharisee, but the hand of the Lord is strong. Being able to take place in the Faroe Islands, this concept album describes the war that happened in the Faroe Islands, but describes it in such great detail, musically and lyrically. The music matches the tone so very, very well. It is dark, it is brooding, it is that death doom that I love so much from the band. And this is some of the best material the band has ever done to date. And if you're looking for some, like, very war-themed, very historical death doom, you gotta go with Hamfer. Up next, we have Hammer King with their 6th album, König and Kaiser. This is some of the best material the band has ever done. Taking a couple years off to be able to write this album, and of course the pandemic, has really made this album so very, very strong. Taking war elements and of course the Hammer King going into much different territory, from Arabia to Atlantia, to even what feels like a cyberpunk kind of feel. Everything feels so perfectly with this album. It has such a great diverse feel behind it, but it feels like Hammer King through and through. Titan Fox V and company have come through once again to create some of the best power metal of the year. All you gotta do is check it out for yourself. Next up, we have the brand new project known as Haller with Rebirth. When Terrence Haller left the Italian progressive power metal band Eldritch back in 2022, he wanted to create some solo music, and it definitely went into a different direction. Rather than progressive power metal, it decided to go into a more 80s AOR feel. You can feel the neon spread throughout this entire album. This couldn't be more 80s if Madonna wanted to dress you up in her love. This is a great love letter to that genre while still sounding quite contemporary and enjoyable for modern audiences. It's very strange to see him go in this direction knowing where he was in the past, but I really dig what's going on here. And if you want that throwback to what is 40 years ago now, give this one a shot. Next up is the band Leaves Eyes with Myths of Fate. The 9th album from this band is kind of a renaissance for the band, where you can really hear the old school feel of what's going on with them. Of course, with the band being around over 20 years now, they wanted to be able to harken back to some of the earlier material, show off what they're doing in the present day, and potentially what to look forward to in the future. Of course, with Liv Christine not being in the band for the past few albums, I know there is a bit of a polarizing feel with this, but I still think you should give this a chance. And if you've never checked out the band before, if you enjoy the works of anything from Epica to Nightwish, you're going to be able to find something to at least appreciate here, if not enjoy further. It may not be for everybody, but I still think if you like that symphonic gothic metal sound, give this new album a shot and get that retrospective of Leaves Eyes with brand new material. Next up is the debut album from Canada's own Omnivide with A Tale of Fire. This is some progressive death metal and technical death metal done to an absolute T. I can hear as much Opeth influence in here as I do Obscura, and that can really throw some people for a loop, but I think they do it in a way that is really satisfying. You can hear them go over the top on the fretboards and do an insane blast beats, but you also hear that melancholic melodies and harmonies throughout that really makes the music stand out compared to their contemporaries. And considering this is just a debut album, there is so much room for growth, and I can't wait to see what will be happening on subsequent albums. But until then, if you're looking for that pure, raw intensity with some really melancholic feels, you'd need to give this one a shot. First up is After Infinity with their self-titled debut. Some Finnish power metal here, and it's so great to see that resurgence of Finnish power metal here in 2024. This stuff keeps a modern tinge, but also harkens back to the glory days of power metal as well. And when you have so many great Finnish voices from bands like Dreamtale, you're doing something incredibly right. I love what's going on here. It's super catchy, it's got some great production behind it, and again, with it being a debut album, I am so curious to see what's going to be happening with this band in the future. Incredible stuff here, and yeah, I can't wait to see what's next. Up next is Bloodshift with their 3rd album, Cosmic Grave. This is brand new material to me, and I'm really enjoying what I'm hearing from this band. It has that element of horror punk that you would find in a lot of bands like the Casualties or the Misfits, but it also has like a heavy metal and, dare I say, doom metal feel behind it as well. The songs are a bit longer than what you would hear in punk, but it's nowhere near as long as you would hear in some of the grandiose heavy metal, doom metal sounds. It feels like it's perfectly right in the middle. And when you add that horror aspect and all of the lyrical concepts, it makes it a very intriguing listen. I'm surprised this is coming out in the middle of March instead of closer to October, but hey, it's plenty of time to be able to get that ready for your Halloween trick-or-treat list. But also until then, give this one a shot if you enjoy your horror punk and heavy metal. You'll find something to enjoy here. Next up, we have some brand new Polish power metal with Eagle the White and the Divine Comedy. This debut Polish power metal album is something that is quite intriguing to me, kind of like I talked about in another sense in a previous review, where I talk about war being a central theme. And of course, this isn't like Sabaton style power metal. This is more of a traditional style power metal with some more war themes going on within it. And I do appreciate that this kind of touch with it. And as you don't hear a lot of power metal coming out of Poland, it's a very intriguing listen when it comes to that as well. But also there's some great soaring vocals, the compositions are very well made. The production is a bit raw, but I also think it really adds to the atmosphere of the album. And yeah, another debut album. I'm very curious to see where the band goes from here, but until then, if you're looking for something a little bit different in your power metal, but still a bit more traditional, give this band a shot. Next up, we have the band Einvigi with Monochroma, and I had no idea this album even came out until after it came out, and I'm very disappointed in myself as I love their previous album so very, very much. But this was more than worth the wait. I love everything that's going on here, from its post-black, black gaze sound, to its folk metal elements, to, of course, that alternative rock kind of production and songwriting style that is very captivating to those that aren't even into this particular genre. Everything about this is so cool to listen to, and even though I don't understand a lick of what they're saying as it's all in full-on Finnish, I love the emotion that's being drawn out throughout the vocals and the musical compositions. It really grabs your heart even if you don't understand the Finnish language, and if you're looking for something that has that kind of extreme kind of feel mixed with Alcest, and even, I dare say, that 90s alternative sound, I think you found something really cool here. And yeah, listen to it and see for yourself. Up next, we have Eternal Autumn with Below the Lightless Heavens. This is the band's return album after nearly a quarter of a century, coming in at 24 years ago. And it's great to see this band, who really did start out in that 90s Swedish, Scandinavian melodeath sound, and hearing what they're doing in 2024. Of course, you can hear that modern day sound to an extent, but it still does have that great old feel of like the early day Dark Tranquillity at the gates, and even some Opeth moments when they get some acoustic stuff going on. It's dark, it's heavy, it has melodeath, and that great acoustic sound behind it as well. I know this one might be going under the radar for a lot of people, but if you really enjoy the 90s metal scene over in Scandinavia, you really need to give this album a shot, as it is a very raw underground album that might be just what you're looking for. Coming up next is Licebearer, with a name that I cannot pronounce, so I had to translate it into English from Danish, with the album title, Like a Light in the Night, We All Must Find Salvation. And it's funny, that's a very powerful, uplifting statement, but it's also done through atmospheric black metal and post-metal, which you wouldn't necessarily think would fit into something like that, but hey, that's how it works. The vocals on this album might be a bit polarizing for some people. It really has that very stretched out black metal feel behind it, and the music doesn't necessarily match up with it, but if you listen to it enough times, I think you'll be able to see what they're going for here. It's kind of a polarizing album, but I think it's something that people might enjoy if you like things a bit more on the extreme side. You really like that post-metal, black metal feel behind it that's not necessarily in the post-black or black gaze feel. It's done in its own kind of way. So give this one a shot if you're feeling a bit saucy. Up next is the band The More with Umbra. And this might be my favorite release that I talk about this week. It's been a bit of time since their previous album, Jupiter's Immigrants, and that review, I actually coined the phrase progressive dark metal, which they seem to fully embrace and start even categorizing themselves as, which I feel very thankful for. And with this particular album, they definitely continue on with the progressive and dark metal feels behind it. You can hear parts of, like, say, Nevermore. You can also hear Hypocrisy on this album. There's a little bit of Opeth feel behind it, and of course their own sound from The More. Everything that I loved so much about their previous album, they seem to amp up and change just enough to make this album its own entity and make it truly stand out in this style. And if you're looking for something with that really dark feel behind it, with just enough prog behind it, I definitely implore you to go check out The More and Umbra. It's definitely going to be one of my favorite albums of 2024, but what about you? Up next is Oblivion Winters with their sophomore album, 'Tis the Season for Sadness. This is the band's sophomore album 14 years after their debut album, and sometimes it takes, the better half of 20 years to be able to get something done, but I'm very glad to see that this thing came out. It can be a little bit polarizing with their style of almost funeral doom metal, but I really appreciate what's going on here with its atmosphere, its songwriting. The vocals are a bit polarizing as well too, but if you dig the style, I think you're going to be able to find something to appreciate here. It is slow, brooding, and just like the album title suggests, it is a nice cheery album. I'm sorry. I mean, it is a very sad album, and it really does make you have a lot of feelings come attached with it. Again, I think this is another great one for all of the dark, brooding doom metal fans out there. Yeah, listen to this one and see what you think. And finally today, we're ending with the most brutal album that I'm talking about this week. It is Shock Withdrawal with the Dismal Advance. 3-piece band that just absolutely captures everything that you can love about grindcore, grindgore, death metal, extreme metal, with shorter songs, a bit of a shorter album, but everything is laid on display. Punches you in the face, it tears your soul apart, and it leaves you wanting more. If you're looking for something of more of like that cattle decapitation kind of sound, aborted, but you want it a bit shorter, kind of like some Napalm Death, this is an album that you need to check out. This trio is absolutely insane and has created a masterpiece of extreme metal. All you need to do is check it out for yourself. First up, we have Black Absinthe with On Earth or In Hell. This sophomore album from this Toronto band really feels like a strange conglomeration of classic heavy metal, speed, punk, and even southern rock. Like, I can hear Motorhead in this album. I also hear Molly Hatchet in this album. I also hear other conglomerations of other forms, but the least of which you can say this definitely sounds like a very creative album from the band. It really caught me off guard with how catchy it really is, considering how many different styles are on this album, but I really do enjoy it. They've fine-crafted their sound into what they are, and I really hope a lot of people catch this one. If anything of what I just said seems like it would be up your alley, give this one a shot. Next up, we have Coffin Storm with their debut album, Arcana Rising. This trio is a very strange take, as it's Apollyon, Bestial Tormentor, and Fenris creating something that is not black metal or extreme in any sense of the word. They feel like they're creating some classic heavy metal, some classic doom metal going on here. Like, I can hear equal parts Cathedral, and I can hear equal parts Pentagram on here. Of course, it's always going to have that Norwegian black metal flair to it no matter what they try to do. But it's so interesting to hear them trying to go back and cover music that's getting near 50 years old in style and making it come out in 2024 sounding very authentic. The vocals won't be for everybody, but if you do want to hear Fenris do clean vocals, yeah, go ahead and listen to this one. Next up, we have Rage with their 40th anniversary album, After Lifelines. This is a double album that feels very distinct from each other, but fits so perfectly together as well. The first disc, Afterlife, is straight up Rage. And no, for the uninitiated, I am not talking about Rage Against the Machine. I am, of course, talking about the superior German power metal band, and it just sounds like everything that you love about the band. On the second disc, Lifelines, it is the band experimenting with a symphonic orchestra. The band still sounds like Rage full on, but hearing those emotional string sweeps and the other instrumentations of the orchestra really backing up the power of these songs, it feels so natural together. And of course, when you mash them together, After Lifelines, nice little pun. It's great to see a band doing a double album like this, celebrating their 40th anniversary, and putting out some of the best material the band has ever done. Next up, and the final brand new album I'll be talking about for March 2024 is Sum 41 with their final album and double disc album, Heaven and Hell. This is an album of two halves. The first half, Heaven, is very much of that late 90s, early 2000s pop punk sound that most people know them for, and this feels like it never lost a step. This feels like it just came out right after Does This Look Infected. When you can pull that off and it sounds authentic, you've done a great job. The second disc, Hell, is very much of their heavy metal days. I compare it to the album Chuck, which I feel is their superior album. Some people may disagree, but it's great hearing that heavy metal side, but also that just right amount of pop that goes along with it, and also a very curious cover of the Rolling Stones Painted Black. If this is the note that they're going to be going on, this is easily one of the best ways that you could go out, one of the top albums the band has ever done. First up for what I missed is The Bleak Picture with their debut album, Meaningless. And boy, does that hit home. This is a very melodic death doom album that really hits home for me. The lyrical content is a great description of how mental health works when you're battling your demons, and the music matches it so perfectly. Melodic in the right parts, full of that dreaded doom, and the vocal display really matches up. The fact that this is just a debut album has me so curious about what will happen with this band in the future, and if you can already hit that tone on your first album, it's only going to get better from here. Next up, we have Chapel of Disease with their fourth album, Echo of Light. This album is a bit of a downer because even before the release of the album, the band basically imploded and almost the entire lineup left the band. But with that lineup, they really did create something magical. They have some really killer stuff going on here, starting off from the early day death metal sound of something like Morbid Angel or Death, and really coming up with something that sounds like their own. They're doing some great progressive death metal stuff, hitting some like 80s hard rock moments in times, and did I hear the occasional blues solo once in a while? Yes, I did. This album hits so many different territories of rock and metal, but it sounds so very cohesive in the way that they do it. There's a reason why there was a lot of hype behind this album, and I feel foolish for not checking this album out sooner. This is some top tier stuff. Next up is the band Siverus, or Shiverus, I'm not entirely sure, with Maze Envy. This sophomore album from this LA band combines the best of blackened, death, and doom metal into one conglomeration that can hit all the different territories but still sound cohesive. It does kind of have like a maze kind of feel behind it. It's not just a great album title and especially album cover. It really does match up with the music because sometimes you can feel lost, but once you figure everything out, it all comes together nicely. It can be very slow and brooding. It can hit the tops of the most extreme death metal and everything in between. If you're looking for an album to pair this up with, I highly recommend Spectral Voice with their brand new album Sporagnos. That would be quite the tour, and I would love to see that happen at some point. But until then, check them out. But also check out Maze Envy if you're looking for something that hits all of the extremes. Next, we have the German duo known as Daunt with their self-titled debut. Yes, another debut album coming from Germany this week, and this really hits the territory of like the really heavy doom, stoner doom, sludge metal style. It does pick up in variations in tempo throughout this album, which is a nice change of pace compared to a lot in this style. It will not be for everybody, but if you want someone with some really good atmosphere, really tackle some good mental health stuff, it is a daunting album to get through, but for those that enjoy this style, they're gonna be very happy when they climb the top of this mountain, because there's a lot to explore and a lot to enjoy. And with the debut album, I can't wait to see what's next. Next up, we got Fall of Serenity with Open Wide, Oh Hell. This is the band's return after 17 albums since their last album in 2007, the year I graduated. Time just keeps on slipping. Although it feels like the band hasn't lost a step here. It is the melodic death metal sound that I remember them from yesteryear, but also with some black metal elements that might have been there in the past, but I'm just really starting to pick up on it on this album. It's a great throwback to those early days of the Scandinavian melodeath sound, but updated just enough in 2024. It's great to see the band back, and I hope this is not just a one-off. I want to see what comes next. Next up is Moon Incarnate with Hymns to the Moon. And wouldn't you know it, another German duo debut album for this week. What are the odds? Well, this album definitely goes down into the more gothic doom territories. It's a bit more raw, it's a bit more very static, but I think it really fits in its favor. Imagine bands like My Dying Bride, kind of combined with some, not all, but some of the gothic overtones of Moonspell, and especially that early day Anathema Death Doom sound, and you start to get the idea of what Moon Incarnate is all about. There's a lot of spoken word on this album, mixed in with growls, and I know that won't be everyone's bag, but if you dig that kind of style, you're going to find something to appreciate here. And yeah, I can't say it enough with debut albums. This is something that's so curious to me, and I'm very curious to see where the band's going to be going on from here. Next up, we have Necrophobic with Into the Twilight Grey. 35 years into this band's career, and this is their 10th album, and dare I say, potentially their best album that they've done. It feels like they finally, after all these years, figured out that magic formula about what to make black and death metal work, especially in the style of Necrophobic, and they do this album to perfection. Every song on here rules. It's just that perfect combination of what you expect from the band, a little bit of new influences, but not too much, but just overall that authenticity that you really want from a band like this, otherwise it's gonna fall flat and stale. There's a reason why so many people have talked up this album, and I wish I would have heard this album sooner, but hey, I'm glad I still caught it in the first quarter of 2024. This is how you make black and death metal. All other bands in the genre need to take note. And finally today, we're hitting back to Germany and Finland for this band's 5th album, the band known as The Order of Nosferat and The Absence of Grace. This is pure black metal with gothic keyboard overtones that really kind of adds that dungeon synth, but also that really creepy old school horror vibes attached to it. And of course, you should know what the lyrical concepts are all about with a band name like The Order of Nosferat. If you don't, you got some history to do. This band's 5th album, I think, is their best album just for production value alone. This album is actually very, very enjoyable to listen to, even though it does have that harsh black metal guitar tone from the early 90s, which is kind of hard to listen to nowadays, but they make it work. And I'm glad I discovered this band, and I'm gonna go back and enjoy the previous albums more, but really, if you're looking for something quite the vampiric overtone, you need to give this album a listen. First up, we have the band Horndal with Head Hammer Man. This 3rd album from the Stockholm Swedish band is something that is on the very extreme of a lot of different things. It is very much in the sludge metal category, but you can hear a little bit of death metal in here, you can hear a little bit of post-rock going on, a little bit of atmospheric moments going on as well. Imagine a weird conglomeration of bands like Mastodon and Burst, also a little bit of I Hate God, which is quite surprising to me on here, but it really is a great sludge metal album that hits a lot of great peaks and valleys. This is my first run with the band, but I'm very much enjoying what I hear, and you just might as well give them a shot if it seems like it might be up your alley. Next up, we have Ingested with The Tide of Death and Fractured Dreams. I've been following this band pretty much since I started doing reviews and interviews all the ways back in 2011, and I heard this band for the first time really doing their blend of brutal death metal and slam, and it's amazing to see what they've done over the years, and this album is a great example of what they can do. Of course, it's got all that slam and brutal death metal that you imagine. Vocal gymnastics are throughout this entire album, but they also add a lot of peaks and valleys to this album that you may not necessarily expect. There's some great melodies and harmonies throughout all of the chaos that's going on here, which makes it a much more intriguing listen than just flat out brutal death metal and slam. Those aren't necessarily my favorite genres, but when they're done with something like this, it grabs my attention. And hey, it just might grab your attention as well, even if you're not a fan. Up next is Ischemic with Condemned to the Broken Wheel. This is a fascinating display of black and doom metal, where they really hit the territories of that death, doom, almost gothic doom style, but they combine it with that fast-paced, ultra-speed black metal, which is really pulverizing and also feels like it kind of throws you back and forth, but it's quite the intriguing journey. I know this won't be for everybody, but if you like Blackened Doom, this is a very, very fine example of this. This is my first run with the band, and I am highly, highly impressed with what this Canadian band can do, and I need to go back and check out their previous albums to see how it holds up. But until then, there hasn't been a lot of Blackened Doom albums in 2024, so you might want to give this one a shot. Next, we got Korpiklani with their brand new album, Rankarumpu. And it's so great to see this band back. Even though they just had an album out in 2021, it's great to see that fun folk metal side coming back in 2024, because this is a dark, bleak year, and we could really use some fun to try to get our minds off of everything that's going on. Of course, Korpiklani has never really done anything out of the ordinary with their sound. They've always been fun folk metal that just aspires everyone to drink, dance, and party. Olli Venska of Turisas makes his debut on this album, playing violin to the best of his abilities, and really adds that special something to Korpiklani as well. It's great to see that they're touring North America and around the world right now, and I can't wait to see what's next. Korpiklani is always a great time. First, we got The Absence with their self-titled album. I've been a huge fan of these guys since the early 2010s, and it's great to see them continuing on the way that they have. Of course, there's been a lot of highs and lows, and they haven't always been putting out stuff, but whenever they do, it's always quality. And with The Absence, you never exactly know what direction they're going to be going into, besides the fact it's going to be very melodic death metal. And that's what you get with the self-titled album. I will say this is probably one of the most raw albums the band has put out. The production is not pristine, it is raw and gritty, but it really matches the tone of the album, the tone of the lyrics, and of course the musicianship going on. If you're looking for that 90s, early 90s melodeath sound, The Absence pulled it off perfectly here with their self-titled album, and if you need that in 2024, I highly recommend this album. Next up is the band Argyle with Spleen Angel, the third album of their trilogy from the side project of Misanthrope, the French progressive melodic death metal band, and this is some of the most abstract stuff the band has done to date, but it all does come together. It is very much in the death doom category, but they also go into more experimental and avant-garde places. They add things like thrash metal and brutal death in here. They also go into more atmospheric territory, clean vocals in very distinct places. It goes all over the map, but it fits the story, it fits the trilogy, and it fits the band so perfectly. If you want something a little more abstract in your death doom, I recommend checking out the first two albums as well too, and of course Spleen Angel. This is the final album, taking place over 22 years since this band incepted, and I think they nailed it for the end. Next up, we go back to Sweden with the band Child, with the album, I'm amazed I'm actually going to be swearing during this, Shitgeist. The sophomore album from this band really explores the territories of death metal and grindcore, but they also go into some very melodic moments that I did not expect. This is a brutal album, don't get me wrong, but there are some moments where they let up on that brutality and some things really shine through before the chaos ensues once again. This is a short album, 11 tracks, 24 minutes. Seems to be a running theme with some albums I've been covering this year, but then again, it's all killer and no filler. If you're looking for something that really amps up that grindcore death metal and the odd melodic moments, check this one out. Next up, we have the band Suffer with Grand Canvas of the Aesthete, another band that has come out in 2024 who started off in the late 80s, early 90s, really became more prolific in the 2020s. Look at Morbid Saints and many other bands that have done that over the last couple years. Suffer has come back since their debut album in 2015 here in 2024, and it's just that classic old school death metal sound that you want. It's Americanized just enough, but of course it does have that great HM2 pedal that is done by so much of that classic European death metal sound. It's that grand conglomeration of it all. No frills, no antics, just pure, unadulterated, old school death metal. And if that's what you want, Suffer brings that in strides. So give this one a shot if that's what you're looking for. Up next, we have Waitalati with their debut album, Celestial Shrine. This is a debut album featuring the singer of White Ward, doing some Ukrainian progressive folk death, black, so many different styles going on here, but it all makes sense when you listen to the music. When you first hear it, you might be a little thrown off because it does kind of go bonkers in a little places, but the more that you listen to it and the more that you really encapsulate yourself with the music, all of it starts to make so much sense, and you wonder how you went on without it. This is some fantastic stuff, and it's great to see Ukraine being able to continue to make some amazing music here in 2024. And considering this is just a debut album featuring some key members in the Ukrainian metal scene, I'm so curious about what's gonna come next. And finally today we have Wrist Meet Razor with Degeneration. This is another album that just goes absolutely bonkers in all the craziest ways. It hits power violence, it hits noise, it hits post-hardcore, it hits emo rock, and it hits everything in between. This album is an absolute bluster of an album, and you just never know what direction it's entirely going to be going into, but what a ride it really is. The lyrical concepts really hit home. The production on this album is fantastic considering everything that they have to accomplish on this album, and if this is what it sounds like on the record, I can only imagine what it sounds like when you hear it live. This album is absolutely insane, and if you're looking for something a bit more on the emo side of the extreme metal side, give this. First up is Hypersonic with Chaos Magnia. I really enjoy what's going on here. It feels like a really good blend of some dark metal, some symphonic power metal, gets a little bit into the symphonic and gothic death metal territories as well, especially when you have guests like Mark Jensen being able to show off his magnificent voice. This covers so much ground of what I love in this particular style, and it's great to see this band back as this is their first album in 8 years. It's so great to see them back, and I really hope that they stick around and the next album won't take so long, but until then, it proves that quality always beats out quantity. Next up, we have Martico with Acida. At least, I hope that's how you pronounce both of those names. But what I can say is this sophomore album rules. It combines what I love about doom metal, sludge metal, and yeah, even some atmospheric black metal going on here into some great distorted, disjointed moments that flow together so perfectly. It feels like a paradox, but it works so very, very well. I love the vocal delivery on this album. I love the atmosphere of this album. The production is top-notch for the style. Raw, but not too crystal clear. It's just got everything that I'm looking for. And if you're looking for something on that heavier side, you really should give this one a shot. Up next, we have the sophomore album from Mother of All with Global Parasitic Leviathan. This is some fantastic melodeath here that is not in your really traditional melodeath of what things have become, especially in the 21st century. This thing is much faster, much thrashier, and kind of goes off the walls a little bit, and I really appreciate that. You got the speeds here that really, really work in the band's favor, and you can really tell that this is a post-pandemic album. I mean, just read between the lines. But also, along with all of that, the musicianship is just amazing on this album. I really appreciate the more raw approach of the production on this album, and yeah, this album definitely feels like that anger from the heart. And if you feel that as well, and if you want some more intensity in your melodic death metal, next up is Set Your Sails with Bad Blood. I have heard about this band ever since they formed in 2018, and never really checked them out until this album, but I'm so glad that I finally gave them a shot, as they are doing magnificent German pop-infused metal, and it's just so much fun to listen to. You got all the modern tropes that are going on. Everything is just super, super catchy. The vocals are just pristine on this album, especially for what you're looking for on here. Whether it gets more intense, whether it gets super catchy, it's just got everything that you're looking for here. And if you like bands like Dead by April or Electric Callboy, you need to check out a band like Set Your Sails, because I think this could be something that would be right up your alley. Just some good, fun, modern metal. What more could you want? Next up, we have the legendary folk metal band Tyr with Battle Ballads. Now, it's been quite a number of years since the last Tyr album, and I'm so glad to see the band back, and they're striving to make some of the best material the band has ever done. Despite the title, it is not an album full of ballads. That would be weird to think Tyr would do something like that. These are war anthems. While it does get slower in some points, it is either mid-tempo stompers or the kind of music you go out to battle towards. This fast, super fun, it's everything that you look for in a Tyr album. And I'm glad to see them directing the ship back in this direction because this is the Tyr that I love. And it's just great to see that Tyr is back having fun as well. You can just hear it. They're out on tour in North America right now, if they're coming by you. Next up, we have Veritaris with The Dark Horizon. And this Seattle band feels like they were plucked right out of a snowstorm deep in the heart of a Finnish forest. Yet, they're from America. And that's insane to me, considering all the things given. This is pure blackened melodeath, and I love it for it. Like, you hear the tropes of melodic death metal going on here, a bit more eerie, a bit more sinister, but you also have more black metal style vocals going on. You have more that was black metal keys and orchestration going on. It's a great combination, and it's great to see that coming out of America as well. It should not work on paper, but it really does. And if you're looking for a nice concoction like this, I implore you to check this thing out. It is fantastic stuff. Next up, we have Veritaris with The Dark Horizon. And this Seattle band feels like they were plucked right out of a snowstorm deep in the heart of a Finnish forest. Yet, they're from America. And that's insane to me, considering all the things given. This is pure blackened melodeath, and I love it for it. Like, you hear the tropes of melodic death metal going on here, a bit more eerie, a bit more sinister, but you also have more black metal style vocals going on. You have more that was black metal keys and orchestration going on. It's a great combination, and it's great to see that coming out of America as well. It's like some odd mix of like mixing Watain and the Black Dahlia murder combined. It should not work on paper, but it really does. And if you're looking for a nice concoction like this, I implore you to check this thing out. It is fantastic stuff. Next up is Austere with Beneath the Threshold. Again, it's great to see this band back in less than a year, just a couple weeks shy of a full year since their previous album. And of course, if you know anything about Austere, you know that this is some of the darkest, deepest, depressive black metal out there. And I also appreciate the fact that they actually know how to use good production when they make this kind of style of black metal, because that's not always the case. But when it comes to Austere, the vocals are just heart-wrenching. The lyrics are too relatable for someone of my mental health capacity, and the music just matches up with everything perfectly. This is a fantastic display of how to do depressive black metal and not sound like crap, and I've always appreciated that about the band. And will they wait less than a year to put out another album, or are they going to take their time next time? Let's find out. Next up, we have the debut album from this mellow black band known as Crimson Blade with Indeterminatus. This thing is so cool to me. It has a little bit of melodeath going on there, but it is more of a pure mellow black album. Imagine some weird conglomeration of Watain and the Black Dahlia murder. It should not work, but it works so very well. It's dark, it's evil, it has everything that you're looking for if you want some melodic black metal, with just hints of a little more thrash and melodeath moments at times. This is just the debut album, and I'm so excited to see what's going to be coming up next for the band, because if they're already pulling this off, the sky is the limit for Crimson Blade. Next up is the debut album from Demon Slot 666 with Endless Witchcraft. This is a Chinese blackened speed metal band. Yeah, you heard that right. And I'm very impressed by it. Seriously, if you love the likes of Midnight and Toxic Holocaust, Demon Slot 666 is going to be right up your alley. The songs are insane, it's got that great black and roll, blackened speed metal sound behind it, and hey, if you really love those early day Possessed albums, the Rototom fills that happen throughout the entire album, mwah. I just love it. This thing rules. And if you are any kind of blackened speed metal fan, you need to check this out. Next up is Destroyer of Lights with Degradation Years. Feel like I've checked this band out before, but I completely forgot all about them. Then I heard this record, and I love what I'm hearing here, but it is so strange to me. I mean, it's got everything that I should love about it. It's got doom metal, it's got some alternative metal kind of stuff going on, it's got hard rock, it's super catchy. Despite it being doom, it is super catchy. But just imagine this. Imagine if Helmet wrote doom metal. I know, that seems kind of weird, right? But that's what Destroyer of Light sounds like to me. It's got the hard rock and alternative metal that you would expect from someone like Helmet, but done through a doom metal filter. It is so strange on paper, but so good in execution. And I hope more people check this out. All clean vocals, pristine production, fantastic stuff here. Destroyer of Light, you got my blessing. Next up is Gone Till Winter with Hiding from the Sun. While the band has put out a lot of EPs, demos, and even a compilation, this is the band's official first LP, and I really dig this. It feels like a very gothic, alternative metal, but also almost power metal album and band. And it's so intriguing to me, and I love what's going on here. It kind of feels like a mixture of like Pagan's Mind and Evergrey, and one band that you need to check out that I talked about last year called Abandon All. Mix all those bands together and you get something really cool here. It feels like hard rock and power metal and gothic and dark metal all combined together to create something that's very catchy with amazing musicianship. And if that sounds like something that could be up your alley, I think it will be. First up, we have the band In Vain with Solemn. And yeah, I might as well just be honest with you. This is in my top 2 albums of 2024 so far, along with Scale. This album is absolutely incredible. I've been a huge fan of this band since their debut album back in 2007, and just seeing all the progressive changes that they've made over the years, while still sounding like themselves. On this album, you absolutely hear that progressive death metal sound. You hear more of those really rich, clean vocals that they've really been incorporating over the last couple albums, which is a very nice touch. And also, being able to experiment a little bit more, having some more saxophone, having some more genre bending, being able to do some left turns while being able to course right with the ship is just absolutely incredible. Match that up with awesome production and you have one of the best albums of 2024. Mark my words. Next up, we have My Dying Bride with A Mortal Binding. And this is one of the most monumental and colossal doom metal albums that will be coming out in 2024. This is pure classic My Dying Bride, but updated just enough for 2024. It doesn't feel like a retread of what they were doing in the 90s and the 2000s. It doesn't sound like what they've been doing over the last couple albums. It's kind of a mixture of both. You can hear some of those great quality death metal elements that they really used to harken on back in the day, but you really hear the gothic sound coming through just as much. It's a great, fantastic balance, and I'm so happy to see that Aaron Stainthorpe and company are going just as strong as ever. My Dying Bride is one of my favorite doom bands of all time, and this album lives up to absolutely all of the hype. Next up is Nocturna with Of Sorcery and Darkness. The sophomore album from this Italian power metal symphonic band is just absolutely incredible work, which I expect no less from Italy because, especially in 2024, they have proven to be one of the strongest genres of the year, at least in my humble opinion. With this being their sophomore album, they were able to refine everything and make this album even superior to their debut, which I thought was some fantastic stuff. The songs are catchier, it gets heavier when it needs to, it's got the great catchy moments that you would expect in a style like this, amazing musicianship from across the board, and yeah, just one of the best symphonic power metal albums that you're going to hear with just that little bit of tinge of gothic metal to satisfy those that are into the darkness. This album rules, go check it out. Next up, we have Tomorrow's Rain with Ovdan. This is absolutely phenomenal gothic death doom, and it's that way in every sense of the word, and especially with everything that's going on in their world right now in Tel Aviv. Yeah, this one's pretty poignant. Also featuring some guest spots from members of Dark Funeral Mayhem, and even old school Merciful Fate. This album absolutely shines. It's so dark though, but those moments that you kind of see through the darkness make up for everything. It's so dark and gloomy as well, which is really that great atmosphere for the style, but it just feels darker, heavier, and shines through so much more. Loving what this band has done since their debut album a few years ago, and I can't wait to see what's next. Up next is the Irish metal band Ora with Maelstrom. This is an excellent combination of how to do old school metalcore with just the right amount of sludge and progressive metal elements to make it really dark. I like what's going on here. It has the throwbacks that I appreciate, and they're not trying to be a poppy, catchy band. They're writing some really dark, heavy stuff here. The name shows it off. Maelstrom shows it off. And just everything about this album just matches the intensity of metal, hardcore, sludge, and prog, like I mentioned. So much great stuff going on here, especially for a debut album, and I can't wait to see what's next. Up next is Vattenplass with the Empyrean Equation of the Lost Things. This album is pure, unadulterated progressive metal, with just the slightest hints of classic heavy metal and power metal thrown in. So, in other words, it's classic Vattenplass. This band has always been a killer band, and this is the first non-concept album they've done in well over a decade. Just a great collection of songs, 6 tracks, a couple epics thrown in there as well, but if you're looking for that old school Dream Theater sound, a little bit of Symphony X, the tiniest bit of Evergrey, some Fates Warning, and that early new wave of British heavy metal sound, kinda mixed in all together with that German progressive metal sound, you can't do better than Vattenplass. Up next is Verikalpa with Tumio. This is fantastic folk metal, and April has been an extravagant month for folk metal. You've had Tyr, you've had Korpiklani, and now Verikalpa. This is more of the traditional heavy folk metal stuff going on. Not to say that it's not fun, not to say that it's not danceable, drinkable, and something that you want to see in a live setting, but it is heavier, kind of more of that Insafirum side of folk metal, if you will. But this is fantastic stuff from start to finish, and the band just gets more consistent and refines everything better and better with every album. And the fact that they've had 4 albums in 6 years is just mind-blowing, showing that their consistency is not lost. Fantastic stuff, and if you need some folk metal from this month, check this one out. First up is Ben Sinister with Mostly Great Things. And do I make the obvious joke here? I think I have to make the obvious joke. It's mostly great album. I'm joking, of course. The whole album is great from start to finish. If you've never checked out Ben Sinister before, think of like indie rock, hard rock, classic rock, and the slightest tinges of prog, whether they want to admit it or not, are shining through this entire album, and have always shined through pretty much out the entire band. I really caught into this band with their album Animals, and it's so great to see over the years that they're still making the music that they want to make. It's fun, it's catchy, it makes you think, and very stylized. And if you're looking for something that's not brutal death metal or grindcore like I usually cover on this channel, you need to check out something like Ben Sinister. It is a great palate cleanser for any metal fan. Up next is Benighted with Ekbom, and their 10th album is easily the most brutal album the band has put out to date. It's just that perfect brutal death metal and grindcore mixed together. And of course, especially what they've been doing over the last few albums, they've been adding in some more slam moments in here, so of course you're going to hear those moments going on there occasionally, but not always. So if that is kind of a turnoff, I understand, but I think the music more than justifies it being there. With excellent production and songwriting, it is not just standard blast beats and fretboard Olympics. There's something to be said on this album, and it's quite the dark, brutal experience. So if that's what you need, Benighted just absolutely knocked it out of the park on this one. Up next is Judgment Fire with Kingdom of Skyscrapers. This is the 3rd album in 15 months from this Swedish band, and I absolutely love what's going on here. It's so fantastic the way that they're able to be a goth metal band and be a melodeath band at the same time. And at least on this particular album, they seem to separate those styles. The gothic songs are a bit more of the mainstream appeal, super catchy stuff, and of course those clean vocals. The melodeath side is a little faster, sometimes a little thrashier, and of course the screams and growls that go along with that. It almost kind of feels like two EPs mixed together, but I do appreciate the fact that whether you love the gothic clean side or the heavier melodeath side, half of the album is at least for you. And I'm definitely going to be going back and checking out those other two albums, because if this is what they did, I want to see where they came to at this point, and I'm so excited about the future. Up next is the debut album from Litchfield, with The Maze. And this is some superior goth metal going on here. It almost gets into the death metal territory on here. There are some moments on here that are absolutely crushing, but this is a goth album through and through. The vocals are so sorrowful and just agonizing in the best way possible. This is the kind of goth metal that you go to if you are a metal fan. You want something heavier, kind of like in the Paradise Lost kind of feel, but a completely different style of vocal technique, and of course vibrato. But this album simply rules from start to finish, and I'm so glad I discovered it. For all my goth fans out there, you need to check this one out. Next up is Synthetic Sentience with Aeon of the Machine. This debut album is absolutely bonkers. I've been trying to figure out how to describe this album. It's progressive metal, it's brutal death metal, it's almost power metal, and industrial all combined together. So imagine something kind of like Fear Factory meets Hate Eternal meets Cybreed meets some of the wackiness of Dragon Force. I know that sounds weird, but seriously, give this one a shot if you think it might be up your alley, because there's some absolutely talented work going on here. Even if the drums do sound like they're programmed, they are real. And of course done by Kevin Talley, one of the best session drummers out there. This album rules. And if you want that fast, heavy, machine gun, robotic-like metal, you can't get any better than this. Next up is Spit on Your Grave with Arcanum. This is pure, unadulterated Mexican death metal. Of course, you'll hear brutal classic elements from something like Obituary or Cannibal Corpse, but you also hear some hardcore elements in there sometimes, brutal breakdowns, and of course, if you couldn't tell by the name of the band, they're very horror influenced, and it's some great stuff to hear, especially with something as legendary as the movie that they named themselves after. This is 8 songs, 30.5 minutes, and I can't imagine any death metal fan who loves the old school mixed in with some hardcore stuff, I can't imagine how they'd be disappointed in an album like this. This is just top tier when it comes to that really heavy metal. And finally, we have Vulture with Sentinels. This is the 4th album from this German band, and they really do live up to the name, Vulture. It's fast, it's speedy, it's that great speed heavy metal, classic heavy metal, revival metal sound, and the occasional shrieks and screams that does sound like a vulture that's about to swoop in and take its prey. Mix that all together and you have some very fascinating and very enjoyable revival metal going on here. Everything that you could imagine from the genre, which has no subpar bands in it that at least that I'm aware of. And Vulture is just a shining light in that genre. This is just a fun album to listen to from start to finish, and if you love that sound, you're gonna love this album. First up is ACXDC with GOAT. I'm gonna keep this one short and sweet. This is an LA band that covers all the ground of power violence, grindcore, hardcore, and all of the violent genres that you can imagine. All with their little tongue-in-cheek style. This is the pure definition of what this kind of band is all about. 17 songs, 23 minutes long. What more could you possibly ask for in a power violence band? Up next is Amiensis with Reclamation Part 1. While this band is spread out across the United States now, I will always consider them to be, first and foremost, a Minnesota band. And between them and Panopticon, we're sitting pretty nice when it comes to Minnesota black metal. Although in the case of Amiensis, they started off with more traditional black metal, more black gaze kind of stuff later, but then they really found their niche when it comes into progressive black metal with a little hints of folk metal thrown in between. That American style folk metal, which I really appreciate. This band just does it so very well, and it's just awesome to see the growth this band has taken. And now that they're behind a label like M Theory, I think they might be actually able to make it to the stratosphere. I can really only hope so, because this is one of my favorite black metal releases of 2024 so far, and I can't imagine much else is going to take over that place. Up next is Inter Arma with New Heaven, and wow! Maybe I'm missing out on something over the course of the last couple albums, but the band has really taken a left turn over the years. Gone are the days of that sludgy doom metal sound, especially on something like my favorite release from them, The Cavern. This album is like Primitive Man. It is dark, it is evil, it is brutal, all the extremes. While it still has some of the doom sound that you know them for, they're really exploring things that you haven't heard on previous albums, like blast beats and the tremolo picking, and so much more that goes into their sound that just sounds absolutely shocking to me. I like this style. It's a bit of a course correction, I almost feel like. It feels very strange. But with all of that said, if you're looking for something on the more extreme end of things, check out the brand new album from Inter Arma. Next up is Stormborn with Zenith. This is the sophomore album from the band and also the reformation of the band as well, with a brand new singer, and it's great to see the band coming back, as I really did enjoy their debut album, but Zenith is so much better. I love the position that they're in right now. It's just that perfect blend of heavy metal, revival metal, power metal, and do I hear an occasional growl or two, at least in the background? Yes, I do. I really like what's going on here. It's fun, it reminds you of those classic times. Sometimes it has like a Maiden or Judas Priest feel behind it, sometimes it's more of a Halloween kind of feel. But all through and through, it is Stormborn, and I really enjoy what they're doing here, and if you're looking for that classic fix of revival metal, power metal, yeah, pick this one up. Next up, we have This Ending with Crowned in Blood. It even says on their page that they want to do melodic death metal done right, and I couldn't agree more. With their fifth album, they really are doing mellow death right. This is everything I love about the genre. While it doesn't go for like the super poppy, catchy choruses like you would hear in something like Dark Tranquillity or In Flames, it is much more along the lines of like Carcass or At the Gates, all of course mixed in with their own nuances. It is super, super melodic in the right moments, but it is so intense and brutal at the same time. This is the kind of stuff that I love about melodeath that isn't just trying to focus on the pop end of things. This is fantastic stuff and one of the best melodeath albums of the year so far, and probably of all of 2024. And finally, for brand new albums that come out today is Vesperian Sorrow with Awaken the Grey Light. Going all the way back to LA once again. This band is exactly what I look for when it comes to symphonic black metal. And it has been ever since I discovered them back in 2011, 2012, something like that. I've been a huge fan of them ever since. It is just that perfect combination of bands that I'm looking for, like Keep of Calcium, Cradle of Filth, Dimmu Borgir, even Opera 9. There's so much to really appreciate about a band like this that really knows how to incorporate those screams and cleans, the over-the-top black metal sound, symphonic elements in all the right moments, and just that pure, unadulterated black metal sound. It's just everything that I'm looking for. And you might enjoy it as well too if you've never checked them out before. Seriously, if you like your symphonic black metal, you need to give Vesperian Sorrow a shot. First up is the sophomore album from Folterkammer with Weibermacht. And if you want that in English, that means torture chamber with the brand new album Female Power. And I think that's an excellent way to describe this album. Vocals, female-led, are so extravagant, from the highest of high sopranos to the lowest of lows, with the growls and screams and everything in between. And the music in between is absolutely bonkers. For those that enjoy this kind of music, yeah, it feels like classical music. It feels like chamber music. It feels like all of this put through a black metal band. And for those that won't like it, it really does feel like you're in a torture chamber, so it's a win-win. Everything that started happening from the debut album comes into play on the second album, but it expands even further. The black metal is more evident, the other experimental avant-garde elements are there in full spades, and it just feels like a richer, fuller experience. And if you're down with some avant-garde, symphonic, chamber, black metal music, you can't really do much better. Next Next up is Fractal Gates with One with Dawn, and this is the perfect example of progressive death metal and metal death put together in perfect harmony. You can hear elements even as far back as Edge of Sanity, and also mix them in with more modern day melodeath with like Omnium Gatherum. You mix those two together and you have something that is technical in the right spots, atmospheric in the right spots, super melodic throughout, and just one of the finest albums in metal in 2024. Although it's been quite a bit of time since their previous album, they prove it's all about quality, not quantity. Next up is Labyrinthus Stellarum with Vortex of the Worlds. I have to thank the Harsh Vocals podcast for bringing this to my attention. Justin, Christian, nice find. Yes, this feels like cosmic, trance, and black metal mixed together in this very atmospheric, partially raw but still very clear style that just has this kind of new age black metal kind of feel. It feels like you're lost in the midst of outer space without a planet in sight. It's a deep, dark void. Yeah, like they pointed out on the Harsh Vocals podcast, like, where else is there to explore besides the bottom of the ocean or outer space? Both of those are filled with terror, so it works perfectly for black metal. I really love what this band is doing, and considering this is just their sophomore album, I'm so curious where the band's going to be going from here. But it's absolutely fantastic stuff, and if you want something a little bit different in your black metal, give this one a shot. Coming up next is Los Vostok with Opus Faro 2, Mark of the Beast. This is the pure definition of extreme progressive metal, because it can go from the poppiest of poppy moments to some of the most extreme death metal and black metal moments that you can imagine, all while still being very much a prog metal band. Teddy Moeller and company are doing fantastic work with this. It's an excellent part 2 to the part 1 that came out just a few years ago, but the band feels so much more focused on this album. It feels catchier, it feels heavier, the production is just phenomenal, everything is going in the right way for this band, and I've been a fan with them ever since I started doing interviews and reviews under the name That Drummer Guy. So this band is very near and dear to me, and it's so great to see them come out with some brand new material in 2024. Up next is Oak, Ash, and Thorn with Our Grief Is Thus, the sophomore album from this Denver band, and it's some of the best music that they've put out so far. Love the debut album, but this one just hits home so much harder. I love the production so much on this album. The musicianship went from really good to really good on this album. The vocal melodies and harmonies are absolutely insane. Be it sung, be it screamed or growled, it just works perfectly. The drumming on this album from Sierra White is impeccable. I love it so much and it inspires me to get behind the kit. I'd love to get back on it one day. But all of that said, this is just the amazing way of making North American folk metal work. It has that folk metal sound, some North American influences, some traditional folk elements, and it just works perfectly from start to finish. This is a band that you need to know about if you like your extreme metal with a little bit of a folk side. And finally today we have Volk with 4. And wouldn't you know it, this is the 4th album from the band in 4 years. Absolutely insane stuff here, starting in the midst of the global pandemic and pretty much releasing an album every year since. I love what this band is doing here on 4. And I really want to check out what they did on the previous 3 albums. What's going on here is insane with their style of mellow black. It is hard-hitting, very cryptic, and a good look at the state of the world in 2024, and of course everything in the world around us. You match that up with some of the best melodic black metal I've heard in a very long time, and some excelled production, mixing and mastering a part of all of that. Sign me up, this is my kind of stuff. And if you're looking for something on that melodic black metal side, you need to give Volk a chance, because this stuff is absolutely insane and I'm so glad I discovered him. Now I'll have to check out the previous 3 albums. First up is As the Sun Falls with Kamos. This Swiss turned Finnish melodeath band is such a great throwback to that early day, late 90s, early 2000s melodeath sound. It is so heavy, but it's melodic in the right spots. It really has that Insomnia meets Omnium Gatherum kind of feel behind it, but it is much darker, much heavier, and it just really encapsulates everything that I love about the Finnish melodeath sound. Mix that up with fantastic production and songwriting. I really love where this band is at right now, And I'm so curious to see what's going to be going on in the future, because if this is what they're doing now, and the praise that they're getting right now, I think some great things are on the horizon. Next up is Doth with the Deceivers, and this is the band's return album after 14 years. And I remember when this band started off, they were much more kind of like in the industrial kind of sound, kind of the metalcore kind of thing, a little bit heavier, but I remember them being in that field. Nothing compares to what they're doing now. The band has pretty much been revitalized, as there's only one original member left in the band, and two since the band broke up. They have gotten so much more orchestral. They've gotten heavier. They have the right elements of metalcore and industrial, but it's so much more orchestral overall, giving this great progressive death metal feel behind it. If you need to compare it to something, kind of think of something like modern day Septic Flesh. I think it's a great way to look at it, and of course, Krim is in both bands, so it kind of makes sense. I really like the direction that they're going on here. This is a great way to be able to come back, and a fantastic comeback album. Next up is the debut album from Ghost on Mars with Out of Space and Time. This Italian prog band is everything that I'm looking for in progressive metal today. It is super dark, it gets really heavy in the right spots, but it's very emotional and atmospheric. The way I try to look at it is, it gets dark and heavy, kind of like The Contortionist. You might even hear an occasional growl or two, but it's not the main focus. But you also hear really dark, haunting melodies that you would hear from something like Pain of Salvation or Evergrey, or even Catatonia. And it's all mixed together with some soaring vocals that, especially over the choruses, sound absolutely amazing. Match that up with fantastic production and songwriting, and this is an album that I really hope skyrockets the band. Even though it's just their debut album, I love what's going on here, and any modern day prog fan should be jumping at the bit for this album. Coming up next is the latest album from Goth Minister with Pandemonium 2, Battle for the Underworlds. And this is actually my first foray into the band, and I gotta say, I love what I'm hearing. From an outside perspective, and I apologize if I get this wrong for any longtime fans, I hear a mix of Rammstein, I hear a mix of Powerwolf, and I hear a mix of 80s goth, and it just works so perfectly together. It's that great gothic industrial sound, kind of that dark metal feel that Powerwolf also gives off as well. Every song on here is super dancey, super catchy, everything that you could want in this style, and I'm surprised I never heard them before, and I'm definitely gonna have to go back and check out everything they've done in the past, because this is some quality stuff. Coming up next is the brand new album from, and I apologize for the pronunciation, Leichenreiter with For Now and Never. This is a great combination of black metal, post-rock, and hardcore, and dare I say post-hardcore as well. This is a great combination of all those things combined. There's some great emotional moments, and then all of a sudden it turns into a circle pit on the quarter turn, and then all of a sudden it gets into some great black metal moments that just sound nice and evil. It has everything that you could want from these styles all mixed together. It sounds very strange on paper, but when you listen to it and see what this band is capable of, it makes some very haunting, beautiful stuff. I'm so surprised I haven't heard them before. This is some quality stuff. Up next is the debut album from Not Some with Only Death Brings Silence. Not Some stands for something I can't say in a YouTube video or else I'll get blocked for some reason, is an Ottawa band that really combines things that I love. It has a great sense of melodic death metal sound, like if you're looking for something like Dark Tranquillity or The Halo Effect or Horizon Ignited, this is here. If you're also looking for something of that second wave metalcore sound, something kind of like Unearth or God Forbid, it's also in here as well. It's a great combination of both styles, and the lyrical content really does talk about the state of the world right now and how we pretty much ruined everything. I mean, we kinda did. But at least this soundtrack is well worth listening to for the end of the world. Next up is Orphean Passage with Apart, and this is everything that I love about melodic death doom. Coming straight out of South Africa, this is a perfect debut album for the melodic death doom scene. It feels like it's a great mixture of the Peaceville 3, which of course is Anathema, My Dying Bride, and Paradise Lost, and a little bit of vocal stylings that kind of sounds like Paul Kerr of November's Doom. Combine a lot of double bass in the right spots, and that pure, unadulterated melodic death doom, and you just have a fantastic and completely solid album in this style. I love this album, and if this is what they're doing on their debut, I feel their sophomore album is just going to grow bigger and grander. Up next is the debut album from Violet Eternal with Reload the Violet. This is an international project from Italy and Japan that makes some of the best melodic hard rock and melodic power metal I've heard in quite some time. It's everything that you love about that 80s and 90s AOR sound of that melodic hard rock and power metal sound, just done through a 2024 filter, and it's everything that I would possibly want from this album, from the production, the songwriting, the vocal ability, the technical prowess. This is a perfect band for prog power. If they're ever to play live shows, this is the kind of band that you would love to see and be in awe. And again, considering this is a debut album, I can only imagine that they're going to get bigger and better from here on out. And finally, for brand new albums out today is the brand new album from the Finnish prog band Wheel with Charismatic Leaders. And this band has done some course correcting. I really love what they've done in the past. In fact, I've even got to interview them on their previous album, but I really love the direction they're going in right now, and I can honestly say this is the best album that they put out so far. If their previous albums could be considered something of a tool, I would consider this more to be like a Perfect Circle and Carnival mixed together. And that's not to say that they're complete ripoffs. They have their own sound, but you combine that with a lot of dynamics, tempo changes, soaring vocals, and everything else that I could want in a prog band like this. Wheel is coming out stronger than ever, and I love to see it because they are a fantastic band. First up is the debut album from this Illinois band known as Abscisor with Adam Noya. And this is an interesting combination that I really dig. Think of progressive death metal and post-rock mixed together. So think of bands like Between the Buried and Me and Rivers of Nile and The Contortionists mixed together with bands like Isis and Pelican, and you have one of the most intriguing listens I've heard, especially from a debut album this year. It gets very rough, it gets very brutal, and then it also gets very relaxing. Then it turns on a dime in the most outrageous ways that fits so perfectly. You won't expect it on the first listen, but every time after, it makes perfect sense. This is some fantastic stuff from an up-and-coming band, and they're already doing this on their debut album, so they're only going to get better from here on out. Up next is another debut album from Alchemia with Abraxas. This French band does pure, unadulterated black metal done to an absolute T. Now, it's not that early 90s black metal sound with absolutely horrendous production. This stuff actually has some fantastic production while still being a bit raw, which perfectly matches the music and the tone that they're going for. Mix that with the state of the world stuff that they're covering on this album, which you know is not great when you look at the realization of what we're doing, but it is a fantastic album nonetheless. I love everything that's going on here, and just a perfect display of how to do that great old school black metal, but done through a 2024 filter. Fantastic stuff. Next up is the sophomore album from Ard with Untouched by Fire. This is melodic doom done to perfection. Ard already made a staple with their debut album a few years back, but this is a continuation of what they were able to achieve with that debut album, but even more grandiose. Production is absolutely stellar. The musicianship on this album is done to an absolute T. The Gregorian chants are back, and they work so perfectly well. This is one of the best doom albums of 2024, and there's an absolute great reason for that. And all you have to do is listen to it for yourself to understand why. Next up is Party Cannon with Injuries Are Inevitable. And I'm keeping this one short and sweet. If you hate Party Cannon, you will hate this album. If you love Party Cannon, you will love this album. If you've never heard of Party Cannon before, imagine the most extreme tongue-in-cheek brutal death and slam that you can hear. It's got the great sound clips from movies and TV shows as always, all the breeze, gutturals, screams, everything that goes along with that, breakdowns, all that stuff. It is the perfect definition of what slam and brutal death is all about, and it's party canon. Next up is Thalia with the River of Books, and this is pure, unadulterated prog rock to an absolute T. It's got 80s Rush, 90s Dream Theater, 2000s Muse, all mixed together. It's very easy listening prog, which is an odd thing to say, but it perfectly describes the album. It doesn't go over the top with its antics. There's no fretboard Olympics going on here. It's progressive music, but it's very simple to listen to. And of course, you got the theme of everything that's going on within this album. This French band is doing prog rock right, and I really love what's going on here. And if you love progressive rock, Thalia is going to be your new obsession. And finally today we have Alter with Transcendent Origins. This Finnish tech death band does something a little bit different than your normal tech death bands. Of course, it has the over-the-top playing, the absolute brutality that goes into the musicianship, and especially the vocals. But there is that odd sense of groove and melody that also goes along with it. So when you hear something that's done to the absolute extreme, something like Origin or Necrophagist, you'll hear this Gorgira riff come out of nowhere that fits so perfectly with the music, that catches you off guard, but it makes you bang your head. That is some fantastic stuff. I love what this band is doing, and I love it when tech death bands actually try to innovate the genre, rather than just show off everything that they're capable of. That's what Alter does. First up is the brand new album from Annette Olsen with Rapture. This is everything that I expect from Annette Olsen at this point. It's so catchy, it can get so dark and gothic-y. It's a good look at the state of the world right now through fantasy lyrics, but there is one exception on this album. She actually started to incorporate her husband to start doing some growls on this album. He was originally just doing bass before, but now he's doing growls. And some people are going to be turned off by this. I kind of look at this like the two James LaBrie albums that feature the drummer of Darkane doing growls, where I really enjoyed that kind of melodic death metal sound mixed in with the more popular moments. That's going to be for a lot of people, although it's not going to be for some, but I highly recommend that if you enjoy her stuff at all, give this one a shot and see if it's for you. Up next is the debut album from Crownshift with their self-titled debut, featuring past and present members of Children of Bodom, Fintroll, Winter Sun, and Migraine. This is kind of taking that approach that the Halo Effect had, where they didn't want to necessarily do everything that they've done in the past, although that's going to sprinkle through no matter what they do, but they wanted to create something more catchy, more melodic, something that more people would be able to get into than what they've done in the past. And I think they've absolutely done that here. This album is super melodic. It's got a lot of clean vocals, which you wouldn't necessarily imagine, but then again, you have the vocalist from Migraine, who does such a magnificent job with clean vocals. You also mix that in with a lot of great catchy moments, stellar production, and of course, all the sums of its whole being so perfect for what this album and band is all about. This album rules, and I can't wait to see what's next. Next up is Freedom Call with Silver Romance. And if you know anything about Freedom Call, you know they're one of the most fun, positive, inclusive bands in all of metal. They just want everyone to be able to enjoy the powers of metal, and Silver Romance is no exception. It's what Freedom Call does best. All the songs are super fun, super catchy, has a lot of heart, has that inclusion feeling behind it. It's everything that you would want from a Freedom Call album. And in 2024, when everything feels so doomy, gloomy, and potentially the apocalypse in the air, we need something to put a smile on our face. And if you can get that kind of smile on your face through a fun power metal album and a fun power metal band, no band does that better than Freedom Call. Give this one a shot if you're not familiar with them, and if you are familiar with them, this is another one to add to the collection. Up next is Riot V with Mean Streets. And this is a return to form for Riot that I haven't seen before in a lot of bands. Every song on this album rules, and it just has that patented Riot V style going on with it. Of course, if you're not familiar with the band, they were originally known as Riot, then some stuff happened and now they're Riot V, but also at the same time they captured that spirit of what they did all the way back in the 70s, but here in 2024, it's got the fast double bass stuff going on, it's got those somber ballads going on, it just hits everything that you look for in this band. It is that heavy metal, almost power metal thrash metal kind of stuff going on. Proto to all of that, but that pure, fun, heavy metal sound. And if you're looking for that, look no further than Riot V. Up next is a band I believe is called Sin Eater. Although it could be Sun Eater, but I think it's Sin Eater with Never Again. The third album from this BC black metal band is everything that I'm looking for in this style of black metal. It contains kind of that first and second wave black metal sound combined. Like, you hear elements of Bathory, you also hear elements of Mayhem, but it's also done with a 21st century twist in there. So you'll hear some bands like 1349 or Watain, or dare I say, even something like Death Heaven? But seriously, I love what's going on here. It just sounds dark, evil. It's the anti-Christian, nearly satanic sound that you would expect from the proto-black metal bands. There's not much more you can ask for in a band like this. This absolutely rules. Up next is Two Wolves with Not Worth It. This Finnish band contains the perfect elements of melodic doom metal and melodeath combined together. I hear equal elements of Paradise Lost and Saturnus that I do from Insomnium and Omnium Gatherum. There is so much to love about this depressing style of music that they got going on. And after 5 albums, the band just continues to refine their sound and continue to make some of the best material that they've ever done. It's so dark, it's so heavy, I love the production style on this. It can get into the blast beat territory, it can get into the slowest, doomiest moments that you can imagine, and everything in between. It's that dark, melodic sound that we all know and love right from Finland. And if that's what you're looking for right now, I highly recommend Two Wolves. First up is Baron with Beneath the Blazing Abyss. This is a debut album from Finland that combines some of the most crushing doom and some of the most brutal death metal combined. I love what's going on here. It sounds like that classic death metal sound of that 90s HM2 pedal sound, you know, the metal boss zone, but also it combines some of that great doom that you really expect from Finland, from something, well, anywhere in Scandinavia. Like, you combine something like Cult of Luna, you combine something like Shape of Despair, it's all mixed together here. And you combine that with just that heavy 90s old school death metal sound, you have an amazing album. And if you're a fan of either side, you might get turned on to the other side as well too when you check out this album. A magnificent debut album. I can't wait to see what's next. Next is Broom with Martin. This is the third album from the San Francisco outfit, and it is stunning in its brilliance. That's also a bit vaudeville, wacky, and perfect doom all at the same time. What I mean by all of this is, imagine a band like Sub Rosa also teaming up with a band like Sleepy Time Gorilla Museum, also wanting to make something that's some really vaudevillian doom. It seems so strange on paper, but when you listen to it, you know exactly what it's going for. It feels like something that you would listen to into a cabaret club in hell. It's just something that is so intriguing to me, and I'm still trying to wrap my mind around what's going on here. I will say I love the music, I love the production, the vocal performances from every vocalist involved is astounding, and I hope people will check this one out. Next up is Chalice of Doom with Eclipse. Starting off as a full band from the country of Jordan, and now it is a one-man operation from Sweden. This band has taken some time off and really found what they're looking for in their sound. They are an odd mix. Half of the album feels like it's pure, unadulterated melodic death metal with full-on orchestration. It feels like a mix of Winter Sun, Flesh God Apocalypse, and Obscura, all mixed together. The other half of the album is some dark, barren, melodic doom that feels a lot like the bands like Saturnus. I just love what's going on here. It kind of feels odd with the shifts that it does, where one song's super fast and one's super slow, but if that doesn't matter to you, I highly recommend this album. I love everything that's going on with this album, and hey, if you like those genres, you might as well. Next up is From Dying Suns with Calamity. This is the debut album from this BC metal band that combines the best of melodeath, metal black, and of course, Black Dahlia worship. This is that patented style of North American melodeath, metal black that the Black Dahlia Murder really patented when they were in their best moments. It's also so much more than that as well. It's very video game inspired. It feels like you're trapped in a Metroidvania. It feels like you're deep into Dracula's castle on the original Castlevania. and the only way out is to escape. This is the perfect soundtrack for that, and being able to blend their own spices into this Black Dahlia murder worship style is fantastic stuff here. And I can just imagine from every album going forward, they're really gonna keep focusing in on their sound and expanding it in ways you can't even imagine. But until then, Calamity is far from being an actual calamity. Next up is Glassing with The Other Side of the Mirror. Now, this is an album everyone was going gaga over last month, and I simply just never got to hear it until now. And I'm so happy that I did get to check it out, as I understand why everyone was loving this album so much. Imagine a blend of Death Heaven and Torch making experimental blackened sludge. It sounds so strange, doesn't it? But it works so perfect in execution. It's some of the best black metal and black gaze that I've heard this year. It's some of the best sludge that I've heard this year. And you add in those hardcore and experimental moments that you just don't see coming, and this makes it a very exciting album to check out from start to finish. It is something that you really have to go into with an open mind or else you're not going to get it, but the more you listen to it, the more it'll start to make sense and unlock for you. It is well worth all of the struggle that it might take to get into this album, because it really is that good. And finally, we have The Monarch, with A Moment to Lose Your Breath. The sophomore album sees an almost total lineup change except for the drums, featuring past and present members of Malevolent Creation, Fear Factory, Soulfly, and Mutiny Within, creating some of the most melodic and catchy metal that you're gonna hear in 2024. Of course, with everyone in this band, they almost teeter on the edge of what they're best known for, be it that they don't get into it, and that's what makes it work, because it gets people that really aren't into those styles potentially into those styles listening to The Monarch. And of course, the real standout of all of this is one of my favorite singers, Chris Clancy of Mutiny Within and Wearing Scars, doing his magnificent cleans and his great screams over all of it. Every song on here is super catchy. There are some segue tracks on here that might not be for everybody, and this is gonna rank very, very high in the top albums of 2024. First up is Ancient Settlers with Oblivion's Legacy. This is the second album from the South American and European band, and they pulled an arch enemy on this album, replacing the male vocals on the original album, and now going forward with some female vocals from Argent Death. This is an interesting combination because it really has some really deep, dark black metal screams and growls going on this album, yet it is also has some pop flair to it with clean vocals. It is an odd combination that I know won't be for everybody, but if you dig this kind of thing like I do, I think you'll be able to find something to really enjoy here. It's a great mix of melodic death metal, second wave metalcore, and their own spices and flavors, and if that sounds interesting to you, give this one a shot. Next up, we have Bat with Under the Crooked Claw, another sophomore album here, and the first one in 8 years from Ryan and Nick of Municipal Waste, doing their more dark, fun, evil side of heavy metal, really influenced by Merciful Fate, at least to my ears. It's got some more of that 80s raw production, but it still works so perfectly for what's going on with the music. It feels like that new wave of British heavy metal, just the right amount of thrash, that revival metal sound, but done through Municipal Waste. It's pretty cool stuff, and I really enjoy what's going on here, and if you enjoy The King, like I do, you'll find some place in your heart for Bat, and Under the Crooked Claw, absolutely fantastic stuff. Up next is Botanist with Paleobotany. This is the band at their absolute peak so far. This has the best production that they've done ever, and I mean that because every previous album, even last year's album, has a very raw black metal feel behind it. This one has more of a post-rock production behind it, which I think was the right direction to go into. But don't be scared if you're a longtime fan, there's still plenty of the black metal stuff going on, although of course the band refers to themselves as green metal. This is a brand new lineup for the band. That Hammered Dulcimer is of course in full form here, and this just feels like the real proper way to be introduced into a band like Botanist, who experiments so much with that black metal post-rock sound and incorporating their own kind of stuff without even including a guitar. And if this sounds intriguing to you at all, give it a shot because I think it is well worth your time. Next up is the third album from Gatecreeper with Dark Superstition, and this is going to be regarded as one of the best death metal albums of the more mainstream side of death metal in 2024. Gatecreeper has that perfect sound of being able to incorporate that 90s death doom sound of bands like Autopsy while mixing it up with 90s Swedish death metal, so you get stuff like Autopsy, you get stuff like Grave, you get stuff like Entombed, yet you also get some stuff that also kind of has that Cannibal Corpse and Morbid Angel type of sound going along with it. They balance out both sides, so when it gets deep and doomy and gnarly, it fits so perfectly. When they get fast, they don't hit the blast beats, nor do they need to, but it's that great 90s death metal sound. Gatecreeper is knocking it out of the park once again, and if you've never checked them out before, I highly recommend this is the album that you start with. Up next is Godin with Veil of the Fallen, another sophomore album here from the New York doom metal band that originally come from the ashes of the band Winter, but I really feel with Veil of the Fallen they have found a way to become their own. There's some really good stuff going on here. It is dark, it is raw, it is doomy, the vocals are just soul-curdling, the musicianship on this album feels like you're being dragged through a graveyard. It's everything that you would want in this style of music. And if you enjoyed the band Winter and what they were able to accomplish with their soul album, and if you just want to see what some of the members of Winter are up to nowadays with a new lineup, you should definitely give this one a shot. Up next is Pallbearer with Mind Burns Alive. And this is, I'm already going to give it away, one of my favorite albums of 2024. This is the perfect evolution that Pallbearer needed to take with doing that crushing doom metal sound that they've always been known for, vocals that expand upon what they have done in the past, and being able to incorporate different styles that are going on here. There's saxophone throughout this album, there's more strings going on throughout this album, and of course that crushing doom, while being able to experiment with more genres and never losing fact that they are a doom metal band. This is how you evolve the doom metal sound while still being yourselves. This is one of the best doom albums of 2024 and one of my favorite albums of 2024, and if you don't believe me, just give it a shot. Up next is Pain with I Am, and I must say, despite this being that tongue-in-cheek, sarcastic, very fun Pain style that you're used to from Peter Tägtgren on this side of his musical ambitions, this is the darkest album that Pain has put out to date. It's very introspective, it's a great look at the world around us, and how we're dealing with things. Peter still has that great way of making it fun, catchy, danceable, sing-along, but it is dark, sarcastic, tongue-in-cheek, everything that you would still want, but a very honest album as well. Peter did almost everything on this album, with some exceptions from his sons on this album. I really love what's going on here, and this is the most introspective album I feel like he's put out to date. And if you want that, plus it being fun, danceable metal, give this one a shot. And finally, for brand new music that I checked out this week, it is Zombies with Heart of Darkness, the sophomore album, and 18 years later since the debut album. A more of a new lineup going on here, but still being able to show off what they did on the debut album, but, you know, more modernized. This is a modern production take of horror punk and heavy metal mixed together, so imagine the Danzig and Misfits of the world, add some more punk, almost hardcore kind of stuff, maybe something like AFI, if that sounds like something for you. Some thrash metal stuff going on here from the early 80s, kind of more in that Slayer kind of feel, but you mix that all together with that horror theme that Zombies started in the mid 2000s and is now doing here again. This is such a fun album. It's a fun album full of punk, metal, and horror, and I can't describe it any better than that. If you love that, you'll love this. And now it's time for some albums that I missed along the way, starting off with the third album from Bulgaria's own Dark Flight. This is some atmospheric doom metal mixed in with the lightest bit of gothic and black metal tendencies going on here. It actually feels more like a gothic album more than their previous material, but if you are a fan of bands like Shape of Despair or October Tide, or what I hear the most on this particular album is that mid-era catatonia, that last fair deal gone down type era catatonia, this is an album for you. It's a dark, deep album that is a soul crusher of an album, but it's much needed soul crushing. This album has everything that I love about the dark side of this style of music, and it might be something for you as well. And if you like that dark, doomy, gothic sound, check this one out. Up next is Hybrid Nightmares with Woeful Inertia, another sophomore album here that I really love what's going on here with their style of extreme progressive metal. You'll hear moments of the more extreme black metal bands like Cradle of Filth and Dimmu Borgir, where they really have a huge expansive sound, but you combine that with a lot more progressive moments from bands like Niavlascaris, or Borknagar, or the band everyone seems to love in 2024, and I'm so happy to see them finally getting their due, In Vain. It has black metal, it has death metal, it has prog, it has everything that you're looking for in this style, but done through the filter of Hybrid Nightmares. And if that sounds interesting to you at all, I highly recommend this album. It is not for the faint of heart, but you wouldn't be going into this if you are a fan of heart, would you? And finally today, and I deeply apologize for butchering this as I'm not good at French, Yours Palais with Disillusion. The third album from this French black metal band is a very extremely emotional album, and while I can't necessarily bank on that 100% because I don't know French, I really hear it through the emotional vocals and the emotional music that's going on throughout it. There's so many moments that feel like a deep, dark gut punch, and it has some great bombastic moments from more simple moments to very grandiose moments throughout the entire album, and you can hear so much pain on this album. It's the kind of album that you would purge your emotions to, and you know, in 2024 we need albums like that. If you want some black metal that really has a great emotional feel behind it, I can't recommend this album enough. Dissolution more than lives up to the name. Next up, we have Moral Putrefaction with their self-titled debut. This OSDM band from India is doing all of the great old-school death metal sound that you'd love. Carcass, Gorguts, Obituary, Morbid Angel, all thrown in together. A little bit of some more modern influences, maybe that just has to do with the production and being able to hear things a little bit clearer, but it's a great mix of that old-school death metal sound and some production that is well worth your time. It is a great throwback to everything you love about the style, but just a little bit different. This is how you stand out, being able to do something like old school death metal, and I can't wait to see everyone's reaction when this album drops today. Up next is Sound and Shape with Pillars of Creation, and this is kind of the redheaded stepchild of the entire list this week, as instead of being old school death metal or technical black metal or grindcore or anything like that, this Nashville band is more in the progressive rock, alternative rock realms, and if you are familiar with this band, you are more than excited for this brand new album from Sound and Shape. This, I feel, is the best album that they put out so far. It's that great combination of progressive rock, alternative rock, knowing when to be heavy, when to back off, when to be more having technical prowess, when more to just write some great rockin' riffs and everything in between. This album really fits a niche that we need in 2024, and I'm so glad to see the band back being able to create such killer music. Up next is Veil Panath with Between the Worlds of Life and Death, and I'm so shocked at what this band has become ever since I first played them back in 2012 on my original radio show. The band was more of a straight up tech death band then, and now in 2024, they started incorporating some more black metal influence, and more than anything, some more symphonic elements going on here, which is absolutely insane, but it works so perfectly well with their style. And what is it that makes this work so much? Well, it is simply because it's not all the time. They can still focus on their tech death side, but those moments of that more blackened moments, those moments of the symphonic moments, seal the deal. If you like either side of this side of the band, you will find something to love about this album, and Veil Panath is making some of the most interesting music in the world of tech death in 2024. And finally today, for brand new music out today, is the brand new album from Vreedhammer with Godslayer. The fourth album from this band shows off some of the most brutal moments that this band has done to date. Per Vala has always done incredible work with Vreedhammer, and this time enlisting Dominator, who is of course one of the best drummers in all of black metal, to fill out everything makes this album so pulverizing with its style of black and death metal. This puts bands like Behemoth to shame with what they're capable of doing with the production, songwriting, and the overall intensity of what's going on. If you're not familiar with Vreedhammer and you love some black and death metal, this is a band that you need to fall in love with instantly, as this is one of the best examples in 2024. First up for what I missed is the band Deliria with Phantasm, and this is absolutely my kind of atmospheric black metal, post-black metal, black gaze, all mixed together. This is the sophomore album from the San Francisco band. It's taken 7 years for this album to come out, but I'm so glad that they took their time with it because it's all about quality, not quantity. It combines so many things that I do love about the style. Think of bands like Dead Yellow, early day Vatnat Viscar, and even some more out there ideas like a band like Woman is the Earth. And you'll get an idea of what this band is all about. Deliria is creating some of the most thought-provoking post-black metal in 2024, and Phantasm really deserves to be on your playlist if you are into this style. Next up is an album I've missed for almost a month now, and I'm so glad I finally checked it out, the brand new album from Dune with Voidkind. Now, being able to check back on the band's past discography, I really enjoyed what this band has been capable of, but I feel like Voidkind is on a completely different level. It just feels like this is the most artistic style the band has done to date. It has the most amount of enthusiasm behind it, and if you love stuff like From the Ocean or Cult of Luna, with elements of Bareness and Mastodon, and of course their own blends of progressive sludge and post-metal, this is an album that is not ideal to miss out on. This is an album that I wish I would have heard earlier and given more praise, but I'm glad I finally got to sit down and listen to this one because 2024 has kind of been lacking in this style, but doing more than makes up for it with Voidkind. Next up is Strandheim with Enlightenment, and this automatically caught my attention because it is anti-fascist black gaze, so yeah, I had to check this out. And the black gaze is pure, raw, unadulterated black gaze, and it does combine the right amounts of post-rock and atmospheric moments on top of that, and of course their overall message, which I can stand behind 100%. There was plenty of people talking about this before, and I wish I would have gotten to this one sooner, but I'm so glad I could get to it now because this does deserve to be talked about. It is some fantastic black gaze here, even if you take out the message of everything that's going on. Very extreme black gaze stuff, and of course if you go to Bandcamp right now, 100% of the profits of this album for the Pay That You Want feature goes to the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. So if you need another reason to support some great black metal, this is it. Fantastic work from Strandheim. And finally today we end with Strike Notes with Armageddon Patronage. Now this sophomore album from this Dutch black and death metal band, what a week for black and death metal, isn't it? Is an absolute amazing combination of some of the heavier sides of death metal with Asphyx and Behemoth and Morbid Angel, a little bit more of the Death Doom territory when it comes to a band like Grave. Yeah, this is everything that I love about the style. Absolute, pure, evil chaos going on with this album, but done so sophisticatedly. Even with the lyrical content really talking about what it does, this is something that just draws me in and keeps my attention from start to finish. This album is the perfect post-pandemic album, and if you don't believe me, all you need to do is check it out. If you love black and death metal, and again, what a week and what a time for it in 2024, you need to give Strike Notes a shot. First up, we have Four Stroke Baron with Data Diamond, and this is an album of two halves that were originally supposed to be two EPs that came together to make one cohesive album. Part of the album is straight ahead, heavy progressive metal that Four Stroke Baron has been known for quite a bit of time, and the other half is the more 80s synth pop that the band has also been known for as well. It's a weird combination that I truly enjoy. It's kind of like hearing Devin Townsend or Gorgira also taking on some synth-pop instrumental elements. It kind of has like a retro future kind of feel behind it, and I really appreciate that. This is an album I've been seeing going under the radar, but you really should give this a shot if you're a prog fan. This is some fantastic stuff. Up next, we have Idle Throne with A Clarion Call. Now, this is my kind of power metal, which kind of combines the best of power metal, mixed in with thrash and, dare I say, some metalcore influences? Well, I guess it depends on how you look at it. I will say, compared to their debut album, it is a much fuller, heavier sound in the production. The songwriting feels so much catchier and streamlined. This is an album that I have been enjoying from start to finish, and I just love everything that's going on with this. This is a way to do power metal without sounding like traditional power metal. And if that sounds interesting to you and you want something on the heavier side of that, this is absolutely an album worth checking out. Next up, we have Relica with Secrets of the Future. Now, this sophomore album from this Australian progressive metalcore band is gonna not be up everyone's alley that checks out my channel and checks out my reviews, but I say you should go into this with an open mind. This is a band that really can focus on the progressive metal side, and if you like bands like Tesseract, they do really hit that progressive and atmospheric stuff that they really go for. But the reason I keep saying what I do is because there's a heavy influence on the modern pop sound that's going on as well. If you enjoy the likes of Spirit Box or Electric Callboy, you really should enjoy this band a lot. There's also like a heavy vocal influence, so kind of like a Billie Eilish kind of thing going on as well too, which I know can be controversial, but I think it really fits for the music that's going on here. I think the songs are tight, poppy, and fun, and if it can bring kids to being prog fans, I am 100% for it. Next up is Rhapsody of Fire with Challenge the Wind. And I know this is kind of shocking to say, but this is some of my favorite material that anything under the Rhapsody moniker has done in the 21st century. Let me explain. This album is so heavy. It is so much in that power metal feel that I love so much. There's no ballads, there's no mid-tempo songs. Every single song is just that fast, heavy power metal stuff that you love so very much. And I know for some people that could be very overwhelming. For me, it fits right at home. Match that up with a great lineup with some fantastic songwriters and an overall production that really fits the mold. This is an album that people should be clamoring for in 2024. I know all the stuff with Rhapsody and all the different lineup changes and all that stuff. If you look at it completely objective, this is one of the best albums in power metal in 2024. Next up is the brand new album from Thou with Umbilical, and this is an album that I really can't put my finger on despite how much I do love it. Now the reason I do say that is there are some moments on here are easily some of the most heavy and most hate-filled moments the band has ever had, and if you look at the state of the world in 2024, I completely understand. But also at the same time, there are moments that are more commercial and streamlined than the band has ever done to date. It's this weird combination of very accessible, primal sludge metal and doom metal. And I think if enough people listen to it in the right way, this could be easily regarded as the best Thou album to date. And I think it's on track to be my favorite so far. And if that sounds interesting to you, easily go check this one out. Sludge needs something like this in 2024. And finally today, for brand new releases coming out on May 31st, 2024, is the fourth album from Wormwood with The Star. This is the third album and final album of their trilogy surrounding death, and this is death in every way of the word. Although this is a very mellow black band, adding some gothic metal elements and some doom metal elements, lyrically, this is about the end of the universe, where everything in the universe ceases to be. You match that up with some of the more harsh elements, the more melodic moments. You match that up with very well produced and meaningful songs, and you have one of the best albums in mellow black in 2024. Wormwood just continues to rise and rise, and I love to see it. This is a fantastic band, and if you love your melodic black metal with more of a gothic and doom kind of side to it, yeah, check out this album. And now comes the albums that have come out but I missed along the way, starting with Bone Ripper and World Ablaze. This band from the Netherlands has put out their debut album, and it's almost grindcore in a sense where it's 10 tracks, 21 minutes, and no BS whatsoever. But it is very much of that metallic hardcore sound. And if you're looking for something that is just as heavy as Hatebreed, almost hits into the death metal and grindcore territories, while still being super catchy with what they're going for, this is an album for you. Bone Ripper knows how to talk about the state of the world, the fact that we're pretty much not long for this world, but you might as well make some music to make a circle pit out of. Again, 10 tracks, 21 minutes of your time, super heavy and meaningful. Give this one a shot. Next up, we have the sophomore album from Falling Forever with the determinism of essence in matter. This is an international doom project from both Rome and Minneapolis that really combines the great melodic doom stuff mixed in with some funeral doom, death doom. Yeah, this has everything that you're looking for in that style. The vocals really remind me of that idea of being able to take a stone slab and pushing it off a grave. It really has that sound going behind it, which I know is not for everybody, but if it is for you, this is done magnificently well. This is for fans, I would say, of Mournful Congregation or Fragments of Lost Memories, or even a band like In Loving Memory, which is a little more melodic. But if you like what's going on here, this is some of the most darkest, deepest, despair-filled doom metal in 2024. Next up is the 10th album from Freak Kitchen, with Everybody Gets Bloody. This is a band that I've loved since my middle school days, and I just love the essence of how Matthias and company has the way to be able to show off what they're able to do with their freak guitar, bass, and drums. Although I will say the rhythm section does not really get shown off as much as Freak Kitchen with freak guitar, but that's kind of the point. But also, at the same time, they can change things on the turn of a dime and create some of the most meaningful lyrics, some of the catchiest riffs that you'll hear in any kind of prog, and just that great essence of what Swedish rock and roll mixed in with progressive metal and what the kids would say gent is nowadays. Freak Kitchen has been doing this for over 30 years now, and they are still showing the younger kids what it's all about. This is some of the best music in the prog scene that has come out in 2024, and some of the catchiest, so give it a shot. Next up is the brand new album from Rotting Christ with Pro Christo, and if you don't know how to pronounce that when you look at the name, it is the very first syllables you hear on the album. It says Pro Christo. Anyways, this is an album of a band that's been around for well over 30 years, that is putting out some very fine music, and while it may not be the traditional dark evil black metal that you expect from the early day sound of the band, they have more of an epic feel behind it. There's more folk elements, there's more atmosphere going on, which I know is not for everybody, but if you haven't figured out what Rotting Christ is all about in the 21st century, well, you got some work to do when you gotta look at some stuff from the past. But I absolutely love this album. I think it's some of the best Rotting Christ material in the 21st century, and again, I know it's not for everybody, but it is for me. Next up, we have some theatrical epic metal from Summoner's Circle with Cult. The fourth album from this Knoxville band takes a bit of a different direction, where they were kind of more focused on more cosmic stuff before, but this time it hits more home on Earth, talking about religion and the way terrible people use it to control people for whatever their endgame is. You combine that with their blend of theatrical epic metal, which of course has some progressive black metal, some death doom, some more avant-garde elements, but sometimes those moments are just so catchy, and it's just amazing to hear that. This is by far the best album the band has done to date. I think they continue to progress with every single album, and I'm so excited to see what's next from them, because we need more American bands doing this type of theatrical metal. We really do. Finally, we end things with the third LP from Through These Gates with The Majestic Rites to Passage. This one-man project from Mammoth Lakes, California is the perfect blend of emotion of black metal and just the right amount of near-gothic death metal and other elements as well. There's so many great string and orchestral moments that are going on throughout this album, mixed in with that dark, evil, black and death metal sound, and dare I say, some really catchy moments that are going on with this as well. It has a great element of so many of these dark, evil elements of different heavy genres that is really fun to listen to. Like, if you want something that has that black and death metal, some melodic death metal, and dare I say, theatrical moments going on, you should give this one a shot. And don't shy away just because it's a one-man project. This is far better than you would imagine a one-man project to be.